When billionaire Marcus Chen found a mute 4-year-old abandoned in his corporate elevator, he expected tears or silence, but her first whispered words, "Daddy said you'd come back for me," shattered everything he thought he knew about his past. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. The 42nd floor of the Chen Industries Tower stood silent at 11:47 p.m., its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the glittering tapestry of Manhattan's sleepless skyline. In the corner office that occupied nearly a quarter of the floor, Marcus Chen sat behind his custom Italian desk, the blue glow of multiple monitors illuminating his angular features as he reviewed quarterly projections that would determine the fate of 3 subsidiary companies by morning. At 42, Marcus commanded one of the most feared and respected technology empires on the East Coast. Chen Industries had grown from a single software patent into a diversified conglomerate worth $12.8 billion, with Marcus's fingerprints on everything from artificial intelligence development to quantum computing research. His reputation preceded him into every boardroom, brilliant, ruthless, and utterly without sentiment when business demanded cold calculations. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows across the acquisition reports spread before him. Tomorrow's board meeting would finalize the purchase of Meridian Tech, a struggling startup whose innovations in neural interface technology could revolutionize their medical division. The company's founders, a married couple who had mortgaged their home twice to fund their research, would walk away with enough money to live comfortably, while Marcus absorbed their life's work into his empire. It was business, nothing personal. Marcus rubbed his eyes, feeling the familiar strain that came with 18-hour workdays. His reflection in the darkened window showed a man who looked older than his years, silver threading through his black hair, lines etched deep around his dark eyes. The expensive suit that hung perfectly on his lean frame doing little to soften the austere impression he cultivated. He had learned long ago that intimidation was more valuable than charm in the business world. The silence of the empty building wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. Marcus preferred working when the office was deserted, when he could think without interruption from assistants, executives, or the constant parade of people who wanted pieces of his time and attention. The cleaning crew had finished their rounds hours ago, leaving only Marcus and the security team stationed in the lobby 37 floors below. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant, Sarah, sent from her apartment across town. Reminder: 7 a.m. meeting with the Japanese investors moved to 8 a.m. Added 30 minutes to your schedule. Marcus typed a brief acknowledgement, then returned to the projections. The Meridian acquisition would require careful integration to maximize efficiency and minimize redundancy. Approximately 47 employees would become expendable within 6 months of the merger. A soft chime from his phone indicated an email from his head of security. Mr. Chen, minor issue with Elevator Bank A maintenance called for morning service. Recommend using Elevator Bank B when departing. Marcus glanced at the time. He would be leaving within the hour anyway, once he finished reviewing the research and development budget for the fourth quarter. The numbers blurred slightly as fatigue pressed against his consciousness. Marcus had been surviving on 4 hours of sleep per night for the past month, pushing through another brutal acquisition period. Success demanded sacrifice, and Marcus had long ago accepted that comfort, relationships, and personal needs were luxuries he couldn't afford. His life was structured with military precision: work, gym, minimal sleep, repeat. It had served him well for 20 years. At 12:23 a.m., Marcus finally closed the last file and shut down his monitors. The acquisition strategy was complete, the budget approved, the integration timeline established. Meridian Tech would be formally absorbed into Chen Industries within 90 days, their founders relegated to footnotes in his company's expansion history. He straightened his tie, slipped on his charcoal suit jacket, and gathered the classified documents that would accompany him home to his penthouse. The walk to the elevator bank felt longer than usual in the empty corridors. His footsteps echoed against the marble floors, a steady rhythm that marked the end of another day in his methodical existence. The motion sensor lights activated as he approached, illuminating the brushed steel elevator doors that bore the Chen Industries logo in understated platinum lettering. Marcus pressed the call button for elevator bank A out of habit, then remembered the maintenance issue his security chief had mentioned. He turned toward bank B, but the familiar chime of arriving elevator A made him pause. Perhaps the maintenance issue had been resolved. The doors slid open with their usual whisper-quiet efficiency. What Marcus saw in the elevator car made him freeze in the doorway, his mind struggling to process an image that defied logic. A small child sat huddled in the far corner of the elevator, legs drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped around what appeared to be a gray stuffed elephant. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with tangled dark hair that partially obscured her face and clothes that looked like they had been slept in for days. Her tiny sneakers were scuffed and dirty, her jeans too large and held up with a makeshift belt fashioned from what looked like a shoelace. Marcus stood motionless, his analytical mind racing through impossible scenarios. The building's security was state-of-the-art: keycard access, biometric scanners, cameras monitoring every entrance and corridor. No one could enter without authorization, especially not a child. Yet here she was, as real and inexplicable as a ghost. "Security," he said into his phone, speed, dialing the control room without taking his eyes off the child. "I need you to review all camera footage from the past 4 hours. Check every entrance, every floor, every elevator. I want to know how a child got into this building." The voice on the other end expressed confusion, then concern, then urgent professionalism as Marcus explained the situation. While he waited for answers, he remained in the doorway, uncertain how to proceed. The child hadn't looked up or acknowledged his presence. She sat perfectly still, clutching the worn elephant as though it were the only solid thing in her universe. "Mr. Chen," his security chief called back within minutes, "we've reviewed all footage. No child appears on any camera. No unauthorized access at any entrance." "Are you certain about what you're seeing?" Marcus looked again at the small figure in the corner. "I'm certain." "We're sending a team up immediately, sir." The child finally raised her head at the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor. Her face was thin and pale, with enormous dark eyes that seemed to hold far too much knowledge for someone so young. She didn't cry or call out, just watched Marcus with an expression of exhausted wariness that suggested she had learned not to expect help from adults. When the security team arrived, led by James Morrison, a former police detective Marcus had hired 3 years earlier, they approached the situation with professional caution. "Miss," Morrison said gently, crouching near the elevator entrance, "can you tell us your name?" The child's eyes darted between the men in security uniforms and Marcus in his expensive suit. She seemed to press herself further into the corner, the stuffed elephant held tighter against her chest. Marcus noticed the toy was missing one eye and had several patches where the fabric had been carefully mended with different colored thread. "We're not going to hurt you," Morrison continued, his voice patient and kind. "We just want to help you find your family." The word "family" seemed to trigger something in the child's expression. Her lower lip trembled slightly, and she shook her head in a small, definitive gesture that somehow conveyed both loss and resignation. Marcus found himself studying her face with an intensity that surprised him. Something about her features nagged at his memory, though he couldn't place what it was. The shape of her eyes, perhaps, or the set of her mouth. She was clearly of mixed heritage, with the kind of delicate bone structure that would probably make her beautiful as she grew older, if she received proper care. "Sir," Morrison said quietly, moving away from the elevator to speak privately with Marcus, "we need to call Child Protective Services. She's obviously been abandoned, and she needs immediate placement in emergency care." Marcus nodded, the logical response. CPS would take her to a temporary facility, process her through the system, and eventually place her in foster care while they attempted to locate family members. It was the proper procedure, the responsible action. Yet something made him hesitate. "Give me a moment," he said, approaching the elevator slowly. The child's eyes followed his movement, but she didn't shrink away as she had with the security team. Marcus knelt beside the elevator entrance, putting himself at her eye level. "Hello," he said simply, his voice softer than it had been in years. "What's your name?" The child studied his face with unsettling intensity, as though trying to solve a puzzle. Her grip on the stuffed elephant loosened slightly, and Marcus could see that her small hands were dirty and had tiny healing cuts on the knuckles, suggesting she had been caring for herself for some time. "Are you hungry?" he asked, remembering that his assistant kept granola bars and juice boxes in the break room for late-night work sessions. The child's eyes widened slightly at the mention of food, but she didn't respond verbally. Marcus stood and walked to the nearby break room, conscious of the child's gaze following him. He returned with a juice box and a granola bar, both of which he placed carefully on the elevator floor within her reach. "You can have these," he said, "no strings attached." The phrase seemed to resonate with her. She looked at the food, then at Marcus, then back at the food. After a long moment, she reached for the juice box with one hand while keeping the elephant secure with the other. Her small fingers struggled with the straw, so Marcus opened it for her before stepping back to give her space. As she drank, Marcus noticed the careful way she rationed the juice, taking small sips as though she knew it might be the only food she received. The observation stirred something uncomfortable in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite identify but didn't like. "Sir," Morrison whispered, "CPS is en route. ETA, 20 minutes. Marcus nodded, but found himself reluctant to leave the child's side. There was something about her silence that spoke to him, something familiar in her wariness and self-protection. She had finished half the juice box and was nibbling tiny bites of the granola bar, making the food last as long as possible. "Where did you come from?" Marcus asked gently, settling onto the floor beside the elevator rather than looming over her. The action surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he had sat on a floor for any reason. The child swallowed her small bite of granola bar and looked at him directly for the first time. Her dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost adult, as though she understood far more than she was able to express. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, shaking her head slightly. "It's okay," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure why he felt compelled to offer reassurance. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." The gentleness in his own voice surprised him. Marcus Chen didn't do gentle. He didn't comfort or coddle or waste time on emotional considerations that served no business purpose. Yet here he was, sitting on a marble floor at 1:00 in the morning, speaking softly to a lost child who had appeared in his elevator like something from a fairy tale. The sound of the stairwell door opening announced the arrival of the CPS caseworker, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Linda Patterson. She had clearly been roused from sleep and looked as bewildered by the situation as everyone else. "Mr. Chen," she said, extending her hand, "I understand you found this child in your building?" Marcus stood, immediately resuming his professional demeanor, though his eyes remained on the small figure in the elevator. "Yes. No record of how she entered. No family members located. She appears to have been on her own for several days." Linda Patterson approached the child with practiced care, her voice warm and maternal. "Hello, sweetheart. My name is Linda. I'm here to help you find a safe place to stay tonight." The child's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She scrambled further into the corner of the elevator, clutching her elephant so tightly that her knuckles went white. Her eyes darted frantically between Linda, the security team, and Marcus, clearly searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "It's all right," Linda said soothingly. "No one's going to hurt you. We just want to make sure you're safe and fed and have a warm place to sleep." The child's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Marcus recognized the signs of panic from his own childhood experiences in foster care, memories he normally kept buried beneath layers of professional success and emotional distance. Without thinking, he stepped closer to the elevator. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the adult conversations around them. The child's eyes snapped to his face, and something in her expression shifted. The panic receded slightly, replaced by cautious attention. Marcus found himself crouching again, bringing himself back to her level. "No one's going to take you anywhere you don't want to go," he said, though he had no authority to make such a promise. "We're just trying to figure out how to help you." The child studied his face for a long moment, as though weighing his words against a lifetime of disappointment. Slowly, she unfolded herself from the corner of the elevator and took a hesitant step toward him. Marcus remained perfectly still, instinctively understanding that sudden movements might send her retreating again. When she was close enough to touch, the child stopped and looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper, rusty from disuse but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Marco," she said, the single word hanging in the air, like a key turning in a long locked door. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. The name hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending his mind reeling backward through decades of carefully suppressed memories. Only one person had ever called him Marco. Only one person in his entire life had spoken his name with that particular inflection, that hint of affection wrapped around the syllables. Elena. Elena Rodriguez, who had been placed in the same foster home when Marcus was 8 years old and she was 7. Elena, who had stayed for 6 months before being moved to another family. Elena, who had been the closest thing to a sister he had ever known during the worst period of his childhood. Elena, who had called him Marco because she said Marcus sounded too serious for a little boy. Elena, who had vanished from his life 34 years ago and whom he had spent decades trying to forget. Marcus stared at the child, his analytical mind struggling to process the impossibility of what he had just heard. No one knew about Elena. He had never mentioned her to anyone, never shared the story of those 6 months when he had felt almost like he belonged somewhere. The name Marco existed nowhere in his current life, filed away with all the other painful memories he had learned to suppress. "What did you say?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The child took another small step closer, still clutching her elephant but no longer pressing herself against the wall. "Marco," she repeated more clearly this time. "Mama said you would come back for me." The words hit Marcus like lightning, illuminating connections his mind had been refusing to make. The child's features, which had seemed vaguely familiar, suddenly made sense. The shape of her eyes, the set of her mouth, the delicate bone structure. They weren't familiar because he had seen them before in this child. They were familiar because he had seen them in Elena's face, all those years ago. "Your mama," Marcus managed, his throat suddenly dry. "What was your mama's name?" "Elena," the child said simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Elena Rodriguez. She said you used to take care of her when she was little, and now you would take care of me." The elevator, the hallway, the concerned faces of the security team, and the caseworker, everything around Marcus seemed to fade into irrelevance. The only thing that existed was this small child who had somehow found her way to him across impossible distances and decades of separation, carrying a message from a past he had thought was buried forever. His hands were shaking. Marcus Chen, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who had faced down hostile corporate raiders and vindictive competitors with ice-cold composure, was trembling, like a child himself. "Sir?" Morrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" Marcus couldn't answer. He was 8 years old again, sitting in a dingy foster home kitchen while Elena carefully divided her portion of dinner in half, insisting he take the larger piece because he was bigger and needed more food. He was remembering the way she had crawled into his bed during thunderstorms, not because she was scared, but because she somehow knew that he was, even though he would never admit it. He was remembering the day the social worker came to take her away, how Elena had pressed a small folded paper into his hand before climbing into the car. How he had unfolded it later to find a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands, with "Marco and Elena forever," written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. He was remembering how he had thrown the drawing away the next day, telling himself that caring about people only led to pain. How he had built his entire life philosophy around that moment of abandonment, using it as the foundation for decades of emotional isolation. And now, Elena's daughter was standing in front of him, using the name that only Elena had ever called him, claiming that her mother had sent her to find him. "How?" he whispered, the word escaping before he could stop it. The child tilted her head, considering his question with the same analytical intelligence he recognized in his own approach to problems. "Mama was sick," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, despite the weight of the words. "She told me stories about when you were little, about how you protected her and shared your food. She said if anything happened to her, I should find Marco Chen, because family takes care of family." Family takes care of family. The phrase hit Marcus like a physical blow, dredging up memories he had spent decades suppressing. Elena had said those exact words to him once, when he had given her his jacket because she was cold, and he noticed her foster parents didn't seem to care whether she was comfortable. Marcus sank fully to his knees, bringing himself to the child's eye level. His expensive suit would be ruined by the marble floor, but he couldn't bring himself to care about such a trivial concern. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion he couldn't control. "Lily," she replied, taking another step closer until she was almost within arm's reach. "Lily Elena Rodriguez. Mama said my middle name was for the most important person in her life, the boy who taught her that some people do keep their promises." The revelation staggered him. Elena had named her daughter after their childhood connection, had preserved the memory of their brief time together when Marcus had convinced himself it meant nothing. All these years, while he had been building walls and accumulating wealth and power, Elena had been somewhere in the world, raising a daughter, and telling her stories about Marco. "Mr. Chen," Linda Patterson said gently, "I think we need to discuss the next steps. This child needs immediate placement, and while this connection to your past is clearly significant, the legal requirements—" "No?" The word escaped Marcus with startling finality. He looked up at the caseworker, his expression transforming from shocked vulnerability back to the commanding presence that had built his empire. "She's not going into the system." Linda Patterson frowned, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "Sir, I understand this is emotional, but you can't simply—" "Elena Rodriguez was my foster sister," Marcus said, rising to his feet but keeping his eyes on Lily. "If this child is telling the truth about her mother, then she's the closest thing to family I have in this world." He turned to face the caseworker directly, his voice carrying the authority that had cowed hostile board members and intimidated corporate rivals. "I want to file for emergency temporary custody. Tonight." The request was unprecedented, and Linda Patterson clearly knew it. "Mr. Chen, the process doesn't work that way. There are background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations. Emergency placement typically goes to licensed foster families or—" "I have resources," Marcus interrupted, his mind already calculating the legal steps required. "I can have attorneys here within an hour. I can expedite every requirement, provide any documentation needed, undergo any evaluation demanded." He looked down at Lily, who was watching the adult conversation with the wary intelligence of a child who had learned to read situations for her own survival. "She came here looking for me specifically. Elena sent her to me. I'm not letting her disappear into the system." James Morrison stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Sir, perhaps we should call your legal team. If you're serious about this, you'll need proper representation." Marcus nodded, already reaching for his phone. His personal attorney, David Kim, answered on the second ring despite the late hour one of the advantages of paying premium rates for legal services. "David, I need you at Chen Industries immediately. Bring your family law specialist. We're filing for emergency custody of a minor child." While Marcus coordinated with his legal team, Lily remained beside the elevator, finishing her granola bar with careful deliberation. She seemed less frightened now, though she continued to clutch the stuffed elephant against her chest like armor. Her eyes followed Marcus as he moved around the hallway, making calls and issuing instructions with the focused intensity that had built his business empire. Linda Patterson attempted to object to the irregular proceedings, but Marcus's team of attorneys arrived with impressive speed and immediately began the complex process of filing emergency custody papers. Within 2 hours, they had assembled enough documentation and legal precedent to make a compelling case for temporary placement with Marcus, pending a full custody evaluation. "This is highly unusual," Linda Patterson warned as she reluctantly signed the temporary placement agreement. "Emergency custody typically requires existing family relationships or extraordinary circumstances." Elena Rodriguez listed Marcus Chen as emergency contact for her daughter. Marcus's family law specialist announced, producing a document that had materialized from somewhere in the efficient legal machinery. This constitutes existing family designation under New York state law. Marcus stared at the document, recognizing Elena's signature from memory. Somehow, she had managed to list him as Lily's emergency contact without his knowledge, creating a legal connection that spanned decades and vast distances. The foresight required for such planning suggested Elena had been thinking about this possibility for years. By 4:00 a.m., the paperwork was complete. Lily would be placed in Marcus's temporary custody while social services conducted their evaluation. She would have a medical examination within 24 hours, and Marcus would undergo psychological assessment and background screening. If everything checked out, temporary custody could be extended while they searched for any other living relatives. As the various officials and attorneys departed, Marcus found himself alone with Lily in the quiet hallway. She had observed the entire proceeding with remarkable composure for a 4-year-old, as though she understood that her future was being decided by adult conversations full of legal terms and bureaucratic procedures. "Are you tired?" Marcus asked, suddenly realizing he had no idea how to care for a small child. His penthouse had no child. Safe furniture, no toys, no clothes that would fit her. He would need to completely reorganize his life to accommodate another person's needs, something he had successfully avoided for 42 years. Lily nodded, then looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes. "Are you really going to take care of me like you took care of Mama?" The question pierced through his emotional defenses with surgical precision. Marcus had spent 3 decades convincing himself that his brief time with Elena had been meaningless, that caring about people was a weakness he couldn't afford. Now this small child was asking him to do exactly what he had sworn never to do again: open his heart to someone who might leave. But Elena had sent her daughter to him. After all these years, despite his success and wealth and reputation for ruthless business practices, Elena had trusted him with the most precious thing in her world. The responsibility was terrifying and humbling in equal measure. Marcus knelt beside Lily one more time, meeting her gaze directly. "Yes?" he said, the word carrying the weight of a promise he wasn't sure he knew how to keep. "I'm going to take care of you, just like family should." Lily smiled for the first time since he had found Hera, small, tentative expression that transformed her entire face and reminded him so powerfully of Elena that his chest tightened with unexpected emotion. She reached out and took his hand with her free one, her small fingers warm and trusting against his palm. As Marcus led Lily toward the elevator that would take them to his penthouse, he couldn't help but reflect on the impossible circumstances that had brought them together. Somehow, Elena's daughter had found her way to his building, into his private elevator, carrying memories and connections that should have been impossible for a 4-year-old to possess. But as the elevator doors closed and he looked down at the small child now under his protection, Marcus realized that the how and why of her arrival mattered less than what happened next. For the first time in 34 years, he was no longer alone in the world. And for the first time since childhood, Marcus Chen was terrified of losing someone he was beginning to care about. The first memory Marcus Chen could recall with perfect clarity was standing in the lobby of the County Social Services building at age 5, clutching a plastic garbage bag that contained everything he owned in the world. His mother, Li Wei, had brought him there on a Tuesday morning in March, her face drawn with exhaustion and something that might have been relief. She spoke to the caseworker in rapid Mandarin, gesturing toward Marcus with hands that trembled slightly from whatever substance had finally overwhelmed her ability to function as a parent. Marcus understood enough of the conversation to know he was being surrendered permanently. The word adoption appeared several times, along with phrases about better opportunities and futures his mother couldn't provide. What he remembered most clearly wasn't the words, but the way his mother avoided looking at him directly, as though eye contact might weaken her resolve. When the paperwork was complete, Li Wei knelt beside him for the last time. "Be good, Marcus," she said in English, her accent thick with emotion. "Be better than me." She pressed a small jade elephant into his palm. The only thing of value she had left then walked out of the building without looking back. Marcus never saw her again. The jade elephant had been lost somewhere during his third foster placement, when the family's teenage son decided that Chinese kids didn't deserve nice things. By then, Marcus had learned the fundamental lesson that would shape the rest of his life. People leave, possessions disappear, and the only person you can count on is yourself. The succession of foster homes that followed taught him additional lessons in emotional survival. The Hendersons, who took in children for the monthly stipend and spent the money on cigarettes and lottery tickets while feeding their charges generic cereal for dinner. The Kowalskis, who meant well but already had 4 biological children and treated Marcus like an unwelcome houseguest who might steal attention from their real family. The Washingtons, who demanded perfect behavior and straight A's in exchange for basic necessities, then acted surprised when Marcus couldn't express gratitude for their conditional care. Each placement reinforced the same message. He was temporary, expendable, a burden to be endured rather than a child to be loved. Marcus learned to pack his few belongings quickly when caseworkers appeared with apologetic expressions and new placement forms. He learned to keep his emotions carefully controlled because tears were weakness, and weakness invited exploitation. Most importantly, he learned that attachment led to abandonment, so the safest strategy was never to care about anyone or anything too deeply. The exception had been Elena Rodriguez. Marcus was 8 when she arrived at the Morrison foster home, a 7-year-old girl with enormous dark eyes and a stubborn chin that suggested she wouldn't break easily despite her circumstances. The Morrisons were better than most. They provided adequate food and didn't hit the children, but they also maintained emotional distance that made it clear the arrangement was purely business. Elena was different from the other children who cycled through the Morrison house. She shared her food without being asked, helped younger children with homework she barely understood herself, and somehow maintained an optimism that Marcus found both inspiring and terrifying. She called him Marco because she said Marcus sounded too serious for a little boy, and she insisted they were family now because family was what you chose, not what you were born with. For 6 months, Marcus experienced something he had never felt before: the security of having someone who genuinely cared about his welfare. Elena saved him the last cookie from lunch, helped him with English homework when his pride wouldn't let him ask the adults for help, and crawled into his bed during thunderstorms because she somehow understood that he was afraid even when he couldn't admit it to himself. When the caseworker came to move Elena to a family in Albany who wanted to adopt a daughter, Marcus felt something break inside his chest that he couldn't name. Elena pressed a folded paper into his hand before leaving a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands with "Marco and Elena Forever" written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. Marcus kept the drawing for exactly 1 day before throwing it away in a moment of furious self-protection. If caring about Elena hurt this much when she left, then caring about anyone was a luxury he couldn't afford. He built walls around the Elena-shaped hole in his chest and promised himself he would never be vulnerable to that kind of pain again. The lesson served him well through the remaining years of foster care. Marcus learned to excel academically, not out of curiosity or love of learning, but because good grades meant scholarship opportunities, and scholarships meant escape from the system. He studied with single-minded determination, viewing education as a tool for independence rather than personal growth. By age 16, Marcus had accumulated enough credits to graduate early and sufficient test scores to earn a full scholarship to Columbia University. He chose computer science not because he loved technology, but because he recognized that the future belonged to those who could master information systems. The decision was purely strategic, like everything else in his carefully planned existence. College offered Marcus his first taste of real independence, though he approached it with the same emotional detachment that had carried him through foster care. While other students formed friendships and romantic relationships, Marcus focused exclusively on his studies and part-time work. He lived in the cheapest dormitory available, ate inexpensive meals, and saved every dollar not required for immediate survival. His professors quickly recognized his exceptional analytical abilities and invited him to participate in advanced research projects. Marcus accepted because the opportunities advanced his goals, not because he felt any passion for the work itself. He approached computer programming the same way he approached everything else, as a problem to be solved through logical analysis and systematic effort. During his junior year, Marcus developed a data compression algorithm that caught the attention of several technology companies. Instead of accepting the job offers that followed, he filed for patents and licensed the technology himself, earning enough money to fund his own startup company after graduation. The decision was purely practical. Why make other people wealthy from his innovations when he could control the profits himself? Chen Systems launched 6 months after Marcus graduated from Columbia, operating from a small office in Queens that he shared with 2 other startup companies. His business model was simple: identify inefficiencies in corporate data management systems, develop software solutions to address those inefficiencies, then license the technology to large corporations for substantial fees. Marcus handled all aspects of the business himself: programming, marketing, negotiations, financial management, because hiring employees meant trusting other people with his success. The company's first major contract came from a financial services firm that needed faster processing capabilities for international transactions. Marcus's solution improved their system efficiency by 37%, saving the company millions of dollars annually in processing costs. Word spread quickly through the financial sector, and within 18 months, Chen Systems had contracts with 6 major banks and investment firms. Marcus reinvested every dollar of profit back into research and development, hiring programmers and engineers only when absolutely necessary for expansion. He maintained tight control over all company operations, requiring his personal approval for any decision above the most routine operational matters. Employees found him demanding but fair. He paid competitive salaries and provided excellent benefits, but he expected absolute dedication to company goals in return. By age 28, Marcus had built Chen Systems into a significant player in corporate software solutions. He was earning more money than most people saw in a lifetime, but he continued living in the same modest apartment and driving the same used car he had purchased as a graduate student. Wealth was security, not luxury, and security meant never having to depend on anyone else for survival. The transformation from Chen Systems to Chen Industries began when Marcus recognized the potential for artificial intelligence applications in medical diagnostics. He acquired 2 smaller companies working on machine learning algorithms, merged their research with his existing data processing capabilities, and developed a diagnostic platform that could identify patterns in medical imaging with unprecedented accuracy. The medical software breakthrough established Marcus as a legitimate technology visionary rather than simply a successful entrepreneur. Chen Industries went public when Marcus was 32, raising $2.8 billion in initial stock offerings that made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The financial press labeled him a genius. Business schools created case studies of his strategic decisions, and competitors tried desperately to replicate his success. Marcus observed the attention with detached interest, understanding that media coverage was useful for company valuation but irrelevant to his personal satisfaction. He had achieved his primary goal: complete financial independence, but the accomplishment felt oddly hollow. Success, he discovered, was an excellent shield against vulnerability, but a poor substitute for fulfillment. The penthouse apartment Marcus purchased after the IPO reflected his approach to life: functional, impressive, and completely devoid of emotional content. The 42nd floor space occupied half of an exclusive Manhattan tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided commanding views of Central Park and the city skyline. The interior design was executed by professionals who specialized in creating spaces that photographed well for architectural magazines. Every surface was perfectly clean and uncluttered. The furniture, selected for its aesthetic impact rather than comfort, consisted of custom pieces in neutral colors that complemented the building's modernist architecture. The kitchen featured professional-grade appliances that Marcus rarely used, since he typically ate meals at his office or ordered from a rotation of restaurants that delivered to his building. The master bedroom contained a king-sized bed with hotel-quality linens changed twice weekly by a cleaning service, built-in wardrobes that housed Marcus's collection of identical business suits, and a bathroom equipped with luxury fixtures that were maintained in showroom condition. Guest bedrooms remained perpetually ready for visitors who never came, their pristine appearance preserved under dust covers. The living spaces served primarily as a backdrop for the rare business meetings Marcus occasionally hosted at home. The main room featured a conversation area, arranged around a fireplace that had never been lit. Shelves lined with books Marcus had purchased for their visual impact rather than their content, and abstract artwork chosen by his decorator to complement the color scheme. Perhaps most telling was what the penthouse lacked: family photographs, personal mementos, anything that suggested the space was inhabited by someone with meaningful relationships or emotional attachments. The only exception was a small jade elephant Marcus kept in his bedroom dresser knot, the original from his mother, which had been lost decades earlier, but a replacement he had purchased during a business trip to Hong Kong. He told himself it was merely an aesthetic choice, but he couldn't quite explain why he felt compelled to own it. Marcus's personal relationships followed the same pattern of controlled distance that characterized every other aspect of his life. He dated occasionally, usually women he met through business connections, who understood that their interaction was recreational rather than romantic. He was generous with expensive dinners and thoughtful gifts, but he never allowed conversations to drift toward emotional territory or future planning. The women who passed through his life generally fell into two categories: those who were satisfied with the limited connection he offered, and those who hoped to change him. The latter group typically departed when they realized that Marcus's emotional walls weren't the result of past hurt that could be healed through love and patience, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize self-protection over intimacy. Marcus felt no guilt about these failed relationships because he never misrepresented his intentions. He was honest about his limitations, clear about his boundaries, and generous with his resources when companions accepted the terms he offered. If they wanted something he couldn't provide, that was their choice to make, not his responsibility to fulfill. The business empire Marcus constructed reflected the same principles that governed his personal life: control, efficiency, and emotional detachment. Chen Industries grew through strategic acquisitions of smaller companies whose innovations could be integrated into Marcus's broader vision of technology solutions. He specialized in purchasing struggling firms with valuable intellectual property, streamlining their operations, and scaling their capabilities for larger markets. His reputation in business circles was built on his ability to identify undervalued assets and extract maximum value through systematic optimization. Marcus could walk into a failing company, analyze their operational inefficiencies within days, and implement changes that restored profitability within months. He was known for making difficult decisions quickly and without sentimentality: layoffs, facility closures, product discontinuations, because emotional considerations clouded judgment and delayed necessary actions. The employees who thrived under Marcus's leadership were those who shared his focus on results over relationships. He promoted based on performance metrics rather than interpersonal skills, rewarded innovation that contributed to company goals, and eliminated positions that didn't add measurable value to operations. His management style was demanding, but predictable employees knew exactly what was expected and could trust that meeting those expectations would be rewarded appropriately. Marcus's office on the 42nd floor of the Chen Industries Tower served as both command center and fortress, designed to reinforce his position of authority while maintaining the emotional distance he preferred. The space was larger than most people's apartments, with a custom desk positioned to provide commanding views of Manhattan while creating physical separation between Marcus and anyone seeking his attention. The office decor followed the same minimalist principles as his penthouse. Expensive furniture in neutral colors, abstract artwork that conveyed success without revealing personality, and technology systems that allowed him to monitor every aspect of his business empire from a single location. The only personal touch was a small jade elephant that sat beside his computer monitor, a detail most visitors never noticed, but that served as a private reminder of the choices that had shaped his life. Board meetings in the Chen Industries conference room were exercises in controlled efficiency. Marcus prepared extensively for every meeting, arrived with detailed agendas and supporting documentation, and expected others to match his level of preparation. He had little patience for emotional appeals or personal considerations that didn't directly relate to business objectives. His approach to negotiations was similarly systematic. Marcus researched every aspect of potential deals, identified all parties' motivations and limitations, and developed strategies that maximized his advantages while minimizing risks. He was known for making offers that were fair but non-negotiable, take it or leave it, propositions that eliminated lengthy bargaining sessions and emotional manipulation. The success of this approach was evident in Chen Industries' financial performance. The company's stock price had increased by over 400% since going public, its market capitalization exceeded $12 billion, and its technological innovations had revolutionized multiple industries. Marcus had achieved everything he had planned when he first walked into that Columbia computer science classroom 24 years earlier. Yet success, Marcus discovered, was a destination that looked different once you arrived. The financial security he had craved as a foster child was now so complete that money had become simply a way of keeping score rather than a source of satisfaction. The independence he had sought was absolute. He answered to no one, needed nothing from anyone, and could purchase whatever he desired, but independence was also isolation. On evenings, when Marcus worked late in his office, long after other employees had returned to their families and personal lives, he sometimes found himself staring out at the city lights and wondering if this was all there was. He had built exactly the life he had planned, successful, controlled, and completely insulated from the kind of emotional pain that had nearly destroyed him as a child. The problem was that insulation from pain also meant insulation from joy, connection, and the messy complications that made life meaningful for other people. Marcus had spent decades perfecting the art of emotional self-sufficiency, but perfection, he was beginning to understand, was another word for emptiness. His daily routine reflected this careful emptiness. Wake at 5:00 a.m., exercise in his private gym for exactly 1 hour, review international market reports while eating a breakfast prepared by his housekeeper, arrive at the office by 7:00 a.m. for a day of meetings and strategic planning, work until 8:00 or 9:00 p.m., return home for a solitary dinner while reviewing additional reports, and fall asleep reading business journals in his king-sized bed. Weekends followed a similar pattern of structured productivity. Marcus often worked at the office on Saturdays, attended business-related social events when networking opportunities required it, and spent Sundays planning the following week's priorities. He had no hobbies, maintained no friendships that weren't connected to business interests, and felt no desire to travel for pleasure rather than professional purposes. The life Marcus had constructed was exactly what he had envisioned during those difficult years in foster care. Complete autonomy, financial security, and emotional invulnerability. He had succeeded beyond his wildest childhood dreams, building a technology empire that influenced industries worldwide and accumulating wealth that could sustain him for several lifetimes. But on quiet Sunday evenings in his pristine penthouse, surrounded by beautiful objects that held no personal meaning and achievements that no one shared with him, Marcus sometimes wondered if victory was supposed to feel so much like loneliness. He had spent 37 years building walls to protect himself from abandonment, rejection, and the kind of pain that came from caring about people who might leave. The walls had worked perfectly. No one could hurt him because no one could reach him. He was successful, independent, and completely safe from the emotional devastation that had shaped his childhood. He was also, Marcus was beginning to realize, completely alone. The revelation troubled him more than he was willing to admit, even to himself. Loneliness was a weakness he couldn't afford, a crack in the armor he had spent decades perfecting. So he buried the feeling beneath longer work hours, more ambitious business goals, and the comfortable routine of a life designed to need nothing from anyone. When Marcus found Lily in his elevator that night, clutching her stuffed elephant and speaking the name only Elena had ever used, all those carefully constructed walls came crashing down in a matter of minutes. The small child represented everything he had spent his adult life avoiding: responsibility for another person's welfare, emotional vulnerability, and the terrifying possibility that caring about someone might be worth the risk of losing them. But Elena had trusted him with her daughter. After all these years, despite his reputation for ruthless business practices and emotional coldness, Elena had believed that somewhere beneath the fortress of success he had built, the boy who had shared his food and offered protection during thunderstorms still existed. As Marcus led Lily toward his sterile penthouse that first night, he realized that everything he had spent decades building was about to change. The controlled, predictable life that had protected him from pain was also about to become something he had never experienced: a real home shared with someone who needed him not for his money or business connections, but simply because she was family. For the first time in 34 years, Marcus Chen was about to discover what it felt like to have someone to care for and someone who might actually care about him in return. The prospect was more terrifying than any hostile takeover he had ever faced, and more important than any deal he had ever negotiated. Everything he had built: the empire, the wealth, the reputation, suddenly mattered less than making sure one small girl felt safe and loved in a world that had already taken too much from her. As the elevator carried them up to his penthouse, Marcus looked down at Lily's small hand, still clasped trustingly in his, and realized that for all his success and independence, he was about to attempt the most challenging project of his life: learning how to love someone more than he feared losing them. The elevator to Marcus's penthouse climbed 42 floors in absolute silence, carrying its unlikely passengers toward a future neither of them could have imagined 12 hours earlier. Lily pressed herself against the polished steel wall, still clutching her worn stuffed elephant, while Marcus stood rigidly in the opposite corner, acutely aware that his entire life was about to be upended by a 4-year-old child who had appeared in his building like something from a fairy tale. The soft chime, announcing their arrival at the penthouse level, seemed unnaturally loud in the confined space. As the doors slid open to reveal Marcus's private foyer, Lily peered out cautiously, her dark eyes taking in the marble floors, crystal chandelier, and abstract sculptures that his decorator had assured him conveyed sophisticated success. Through a child's perspective, Marcus suddenly realized the space probably looked cold and unwelcoming, more like a museum than a home. "This is where I live," Marcus said unnecessarily, stepping into the foyer and waiting for Lily to follow. She moved slowly, her small sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished marble, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged space with uncomfortable prominence. The main living area stretched before them, 30 feet of open floor plan with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased Manhattan's glittering skyline. The custom furniture, arranged in perfect symmetry around a fireplace that had never been used, looked impossibly large and formal next to Lily's tiny figure. Marcus watched her survey the space with the analytical attention he recognized in his own approach to new environments, cataloging details and potential threats with the wariness of someone who had learned not to take safety for granted. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, though he immediately realized he had no idea what 4-year-old children typically ate. His kitchen was stocked with expensive ingredients he rarely used and takeout menus from restaurants that definitely didn't serve chicken nuggets or peanut butter sandwiches. "I could order something. Pizza? Do you like pizza?" Lily nodded solemnly, though she remained near the entrance as though ready to retreat at the first sign of danger. Her grip on the stuffed elephant had tightened since entering the apartment, and Marcus noticed she was breathing rapidly, not quite panic but definitely stress. "You can sit anywhere you'd like," Marcus offered, gesturing toward the pristine white leather sofas that dominated the seating area. Lily glanced at the furniture, then at her own rumpled clothes and dirty hands, and shook her head slightly. The rejection stung more than Marcus expected. Of course she wouldn't want to sit on expensive furniture while wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. The child was being considerate of his possessions, while he was being thoughtlessly obtuse about her comfort. "Actually," Marcus said, thinking quickly, "let's get you cleaned up first. You can take a bath if you'd like, and I'll find you something comfortable to wear while your clothes wash." He led her down the hallway toward one of the guest bathrooms, acutely aware that every step revealed how completely unprepared his home was for a child's presence. Sharp corners on furniture, breakable objects within reach, no safety latches on cabinets, no toys or books or anything that might interest someone under the age of 30. The penthouse was a monument to adult sophistication and childhood exclusion. The guest bathroom, like everything else in the apartment, was designed for visual impact rather than practical comfort. The marble vanity was too high for a small child to reach, the bathtub was large enough for an adult to swim in, and the array of expensive toiletries looked more like a hotel display than items meant for actual use. Marcus ran warm water into the massive tub, adding bath salts from a container he'd never opened, then realized he had no idea how deep the water should be for someone Lily's size. Too deep would be dangerous, too shallow might not be adequate for cleaning. He settled on what he hoped was a reasonable compromise, testing the temperature repeatedly with his hand. "I'll find you something to wear," he said, leaving towels within reach and retreating to give Lily privacy. In his bedroom, Marcus stared at his walk, in closet with growing frustration. His wardrobe consisted entirely of business suits, dress shirts, and expensive casual wear, sized for a man 6 feet tall. Nothing in his possession would remotely fit a small child. His housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, kept spare uniforms in the service area, but those would be only marginally better than his own clothes. Marcus found himself in the unfamiliar position of needing something he couldn't simply purchase with a phone callet, least not at 3:00 a.m. on a weeknight. Eventually, he located a Columbia University t-shirt from his alumni collection that, while enormously oversized for Lily, would at least be soft and comfortable. He left it outside the bathroom door, along with a pair of his athletic socks that could serve as makeshift leggings, feeling foolish about the inadequacy of his solutions. When Lily emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, her dark hair damp and her small frame swimming in Marcus's t-shirt, she looked simultaneously younger and older than her 4 years. Younger because the oversized clothes emphasized her tiny size. Older because her eyes held the same wariness that had never fully left her expression since he'd found her in the elevator. "Better?" Marcus asked, and was rewarded with a small nod and what might have been the ghost of a smile. The pizza arrived while Lily was exploring the living room with careful steps, maintaining a respectful distance from the expensive furniture and artwork. Marcus watched her movements with growing understanding. This was a child who had learned to be invisible in adult spaces, to avoid touching things that might result in punishment or rejection. "You can sit on the furniture," he said gently, settling onto one of the leather sofas and patting the cushion beside him. "Nothing here is too valuable to be used." Lily approached slowly, climbing onto the sofa with careful deliberation and arranging herself cross-legged with the stuffed elephant in her lap. Up close, Marcus could see that the toy had been lovingly maintained despite its obvious age. The patches were sewn with tiny, precise stitches, and the remaining eye had been recently reattached with bright green thread. They ate pizza in companionable silence, Lily taking small bites and chewing thoughtfully while studying Marcus's face as though trying to solve a complex puzzle. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama said you used to share your food with her when she was hungry." Marcus nearly choked on his pizza. The casual mention of Elena felt like a door opening onto memories he had spent decades keeping locked away. "Your mama told you about that?" Lily nodded solemnly. "She said you always made sure she got enough to eat, even when there wasn't much food. She said that's how she knew you were good people, because good people share when they don't have to." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered those dinners at the Morrison foster home, where portions were allocated strictly and seconds were rare. He had been bigger than Elena, growing rapidly through a childhood growth spurt. But he had recognized that she was often still hungry after finishing her allotted portion. Sharing his food had been an instinctive response, not a conscious act of kindness. "What else did your mama tell you about when we were children?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled despite the emotional turbulence the conversation was creating. Lily considered the question with the seriousness of a much older child. "She said you had nightmares sometimes, and she would sing to you until you felt better. She taught me the songs so I could sing them too, if you ever needed them again." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The nightmares had been a closely guarded secret, episodes of terror that struck him randomly during those difficult years in foster care. Elena had indeed discovered them during her 6-month stay at the Morrison house, and she had developed the habit of sneaking into his room when she heard him whimpering in his sleep. Her soft humming of half-remembered lullabies in Spanish had been the only thing that could calm him back into peaceful rest. He had never told anyone about those nightmares or Elena's nocturnal comfort. The memories were too private, too vulnerable, too connected to the raw pain of his childhood abandonment. Yet somehow this small child knew details that should have been impossible for her to possess. "Do you remember the songs?" Marcus asked, his throat suddenly tight with emotion he couldn't control. Lily nodded and began to hum softly, a melody Marcus recognized immediately despite not having heard it for 34 years. The tune was simple, repetitive, soothing in the way that only childhood comforts could be. As she hummed, Marcus felt something crack open in his chestnut, painful, but profound, like ice melting after a long winter. "How do you know that song?" he whispered. "Mama sang it to me when I was scared," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "She said it was a special song that Marco taught her, about being safe even when everything else was scary." Marcus stared at her, his analytical mind struggling to process information that defied logical explanation. Elena had remembered a melody from when she was 7 years old, preserved it for decades, and passed it on to her daughter as a connection to someone she hadn't seen since childhood. The implications were staggering. "Lily," Marcus said carefully, "how much did your mama tell you about me?" The child tilted her head, considering the question with the same methodical approach he recognized in his own decision-making processes. "She said you were the only person who ever protected her when she was little. She said you taught her that families don't have to be born, they can be chosen. And she said if anything happened to her, I should find you because you would remember what it was like to be alone and scared." Each revelation hit Marcus like a carefully aimed arrow, finding gaps in the emotional armor he had spent decades perfecting. Elena had not only remembered their brief time together, but had built an entire mythology around their childhood connection, preserving memories and meanings that Marcus himself had tried to forget. "She said other things too," Lily continued, her voice growing softer as though she were sharing secrets. "About the place where you lived together, with the yellow kitchen and the creaky stairs. About how you helped her practice reading because she was embarrassed that the other kids were better at it. About the time you gave her your jacket when she was cold, and how that made her feel like someone finally cared if she was okay." Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the flood of memories Lily's words were unleashing. The Morrison house had indeed had a yellow kitchen, a hideous shade of mustard that Mrs. Morrison had insisted was cheerful. The stairs had creaked in specific places that Marcus had memorized to avoid waking the adults during his frequent midnight trips to the bathroom. And yes, he had given Elena his jacket on a cold day when he noticed she was shivering, though he had convinced himself it was a practical decision rather than an emotional one. "Your mama had a very good memory," Marcus managed. She said forgetting you would be like forgetting how to breathe. Lily replied simply. She said some people are so important that they become part of who you are forever, even if you can't be with them anymore. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that Marcus wasn't ready to fully examine. Elena had built her understanding of love and family around their 6-month connection, had carried the memory of an 8-year-old boy's kindness through decades of adult life, and had ultimately trusted him with her most precious possession based on experiences from their shared childhood. As the evening progressed and exhaustion began to claim them both, Marcus realized he had no appropriate sleeping arrangements for a small child. His guest bedrooms were furnished with adult-sized beds and contained no safety features or child-friendly amenities. More pressingly, he suspected that Lily would be uncomfortable sleeping alone in a strange place after the trauma of recent abandonment. "You can sleep in my room tonight," Marcus found himself saying, the words emerging before he had fully considered their implications. "I'll take the couch." Lily shook her head firmly. "Mama said, good people don't give up their beds for other people unless it's an emergency. She said taking care of yourself is part of taking care of other people." The wisdom in her response startled Marcus. At 4 years old, Lily had already internalized principles about healthy relationships and mutual care that many adults never mastered. Elena had clearly been an extraordinary mother, raising a child who combined innocence with remarkable emotional intelligence. "The bed is large enough for both of us," Marcus said, surprising himself with the suggestion. He had never shared sleeping space with anyone, maintaining strict boundaries around his personal privacy that had never been breached. Yet the idea of Lily sleeping alone in his sterile guest room felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. They settled into an awkward but not uncomfortable arrangement, Marcus on one side of his king-sized bed and Lily on the other, with several feet of space between them and the stuffed elephant standing guard between their pillows. Marcus had changed into pajamas for the first time in years. Normally he slept in boxer shorts, but that seemed inappropriate with a child present. "Marco?" Lily's voice came softly through the darkness. "Yes? Are you going to send me away like everyone else does?" The question pierced through Marcus's defenses with surgical precision. In those few words, Lily had revealed the core fear that drove her careful behavior, her reluctance to touch his furniture, her wariness around new people. She expected abandonment because abandonment had been her primary experience with adults. "No," Marcus said, the word carrying the weight of a promise he wasn't sure he knew how to keep. "I'm not going to send you away. Even if I'm too much trouble? Even if I make mistakes?" Marcus turned toward her in the darkness, making out her small silhouette against the city lights filtering through his bedroom windows. "Lily, you're not trouble. You're family. And families don't abandon each other just because things get difficult." He heard her quiet sigh of relief, followed by the soft sounds of settling into sleep. As her breathing grew deep and regular, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling and contemplating the magnitude of what he had just promised. He had built his entire adult life around avoiding exactly this kind of responsibility and emotional vulnerability. Yet as he listened to Lily's peaceful breathing and remembered the trust in her voice when she called him Marco, Marcus realized that for the first time in decades, his sterile penthouse felt like it might actually become a home. The next morning brought a parade of challenges Marcus had never anticipated. Lily woke early, accustomed to caring for herself, and wandered into the kitchen looking for breakfast while Marcus was still struggling with the implications of his new reality. His refrigerator, usually stocked with ingredients for meals he rarely cooked, suddenly seemed woefully inadequate for feeding a growing child. "I can make cereal," Lily offered, clearly recognizing his confusion as he stared at the expensive European appliances he had never fully learned to use. Marcus nodded gratefully, watching as she efficiently prepared a simple breakfast using milk and cereal from his pantry. Her movements were practiced and self-sufficient in ways that suggested she had been responsible for feeding herself for longer than any 4-year-old should have been. After breakfast, Marcus faced the reality that he needed professional help navigating this unexpected guardianship. His first call was to the most exclusive nanny agency in Manhattan, explaining that he required immediate assistance with a 4-year-old child who would be staying with him indefinitely. "Mr. Chen," the agency director said with barely concealed excitement, "we would be delighted to provide our services. Our premium package includes 24-hour care, educational enrichment, and complete household management. When would you like to begin interviews?" By noon, Marcus's penthouse had been transformed into an impromptu interview space as a succession of highly credentialed nannies presented their qualifications for caring for Lily. Each candidate was impeccably trained, extensively background checked, and eager to work for one of Manhattan's most successful bachelors. The first candidate, a stern British woman with 30 years of experience caring for wealthy children, took one look at Lily and immediately began outlining strict schedules for meals, education, and behavioral modification. "Structure is essential for proper development," she declared, eyeing Lily's oversized t-shirt and sock-like leggings with obvious disapproval. "This child clearly lacks appropriate discipline and boundaries." Lily responded by retreating behind Marcus's legs and refusing to speak or make eye contact for the remainder of the interview. The second candidate, an energetic young woman with degrees in child psychology and early childhood education, approached Lily with overwhelming enthusiasm. "Hello there, sweetie," she exclaimed, dropping to Lily's eye level with a bright smile. "I'm Sarah, and I'm going to be your best friend. We're going to have so much fun together." Lily's response was to press herself more firmly against Marcus and whisper, "She's too loud." The third candidate, a middle-aged woman with excellent references from prominent families, seemed more promising until she began discussing her philosophy of emotional regulation. "Children need to learn that their feelings cannot dictate adult schedules," she explained. "Crying and emotional outbursts must be managed through consistent consequences and clear expectations about appropriate behavior." When she suggested that Lily's attachment to her stuffed elephant was regressive behavior that should be discouraged to promote independence, Marcus politely ended the interview. By evening, Marcus had spoken with 8 highly qualified nannies, all of whom had been either rejected by Lily or had disqualified themselves through their approaches to childcare. Lily had become increasingly withdrawn with each interview, eventually retreating to Marcus's bedroom and refusing to emerge, even for lunch. Marcus found her sitting on his bed, holding her elephant and staring out the window at the city skyline with an expression of resignation that broke his heart. "They all want to change me," she said without looking at him. "Mama said some people think children are broken adults that need to be fixed, but that's not true. Mama said children are just people who haven't finished growing yet." The wisdom of Elena's parenting philosophy, filtered through her daughter's innocent understanding, made Marcus realize how completely he had misunderstood what Lily needed. She didn't need professional caregivers who would impose structure and discipline on her traumatized childhood. She needed someone who would accept her exactly as she was while helping her feel safe enough to heal. "What if we tried a different approach?" Marcus suggested, sitting beside her on the bed. "What if, instead of hiring someone to take care of you, I learned how to do it myself?" Lily turned to look at him with surprise, as though the possibility hadn't occurred to her. "You would want to do that, even though you have important work?" "You're more important than work," Marcus said, the words emerging with a certainty that surprised him. "Besides, I think we might be good at taking care of each other." The next morning, Marcus made a series of phone calls that would have shocked his business associates and competitors. He cleared his schedule for the rest of the week, delegated urgent matters to his executive team, and instructed his assistant to research the best child psychologists, pediatricians, and early childhood specialists in the city. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the child psychologist Marcus eventually selected, came to the penthouse for their first meeting rather than requiring Lily to navigate an unfamiliar office environment. She was a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and an unhurried manner that seemed to put Lily at ease immediately. "Lily," Dr. Martinez said after she had spent an hour observing their interaction, "would it be okay if I talked with Marco for a few minutes while you play in the other room?" Lily nodded and retreated to the living room with her elephant, positioning herself where she could keep both adults in sight while giving them privacy for conversation. "She's been through significant trauma," Dr. Martinez explained quietly. "The selective mutism with strangers, the hypervigilance, the way she positions herself near exits, these are all normal responses to abandonment and loss. But she's also remarkably resilient, and her attachment to you appears to be healthy and secure." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at the psychologist's assessment. "What do I need to know about helping her heal?" "Consistency, patience, and unconditional acceptance," Dr. Martinez replied. "She needs to know that you won't leave her, that she's safe with you, and that you care about her regardless of her behavior. The fact that she's comfortable enough to speak with you is extremely promising." Over the following days, Marcus began the process of learning to care for a small child, while Lily gradually emerged from the protective shell she had constructed around her emotions. They established routines that balanced structure with flexibility, breakfast together while watching morning cartoons, educational games, and reading during the day, simple dinner preparation that Lily could help with, and bedtime stories that often featured Elena's memories of their childhood together. The transformation of Marcus's penthouse was as dramatic as the changes in their relationship. The sterile showplace gradually accumulated child-safe modifications: corner guards on sharp furniture, safety latches on cabinets, a small table, and chairs sized for Lily's use. The pristine white walls gained colorful artwork created during their daily art sessions, and the unused fireplace became the centerpiece of elaborate fort constructions using couch cushions and blankets. More significantly, Lily began to reveal the depth of Elena's influence on her understanding of family and relationships. During quiet moments, she would share memories that Elena had passed down to her, stories that painted a picture of a woman who had spent decades thinking about the boy who had shown her kindness during the worst period of her childhood. "Mama said you taught her about being brave," Lily told him one evening as they built a puzzle together. "She said brave doesn't mean not being scared, it means taking care of people even when you're scared yourself." "She said that?" Marcus asked, thinking about the terrified 8-year-old he had been, hardly a model of courage. "Uh-huh. She said, the night she was most scared at the big house with all the other kids, you came and sat by her bed until she stopped crying. She said that's when she learned that some people make the scary things less scary just by being there." Marcus had no memory of the specific incident Lily described, but he could imagine it clearly. Elena's first night at the Morrison house, confused and frightened by another placement in an unfamiliar environment, and his own instinctive response to offer whatever comfort he could provide. These revelations continued throughout their first weeks together, each one offering Marcus a glimpse into how profoundly their childhood connection had shaped Elena's understanding of love, family, and human kindness. Through Lily's innocent sharing of her mother's memories, Marcus began to see his own past through Elena's eyes, not as a series of survival strategies and emotional defenses, but as acts of genuine care between two children who had found each other in the midst of institutional abandonment. The healing process was not without challenges. Lily had nightmares about losing Marcus the way she had lost her mother, waking in tears and requiring gentle reassurance that he would still be there in the morning. She hoarded food in her room, despite having constant access to meals, a behavior Dr. Martinez explained was common among children who had experienced hunger and uncertainty about their next meal. Most difficult for Marcus was Lily's tendency to minimize her own needs and preferences, always agreeing with his suggestions and rarely expressing independent desires. She had learned to be agreeable and undemanding as a survival strategy, making herself as invisible and low maintenance as possible to avoid triggering adult rejection. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Marcus asked one evening, frustrated by her automatic response of, "Whatever you want is fine." Lily looked confused by the question, as though the concept of having preferences that mattered to adults was foreign to her experience. "I don't know," she said finally. "What are the choices?" Marcus realized that she genuinely didn't know how to express preferences because no one had ever asked for her opinion about decisions that affected her life. The recognition led to a patient process of helping her discover and voice her own desires, starting with small choices about clothing, meals, and activities. Gradually, Lily began to trust that her preferences were not only allowed but valued. She admitted that she loved chocolate chip cookies but had never asked for them, because they seemed too special for regular eating. She revealed that she preferred baths to showers because they reminded her of the times Elena had let her play with bubbles and toy boats. She confessed that she had always wanted to learn to paint but had been afraid to ask for art supplies because they might be too expensive. Each small revelation felt like a victory to Marcus, evidence that Lily was beginning to believe she deserved to have wants and needs that adults would take seriously. He found himself anticipating her requests with the same strategic intensity he had once applied to business negotiations, taking genuine pleasure in providing things that made her happy. The most significant breakthrough came 3 weeks after Lily's arrival, during a conversation that revealed the full extent of Elena's faith in their childhood connection. They were reading together before bedtime, when Lily looked up from her book with an expression of sudden memory. "Mama said she wrote you letters sometimes, even though she didn't know where to send them," Lily said. "She said she kept them in a special box, so if she ever found you again, she could give them to you all at once." Marcus felt his breath catch. "Did she tell you what was in the letters?" Lily nodded solemnly. "She said she wrote about important things that happened to her, so you could know how her life was, even when you weren't there. She said she wrote about being adopted by nice people who taught her about college, and about learning to be a nurse so she could help sick people get better. She said she wrote about meeting my daddy in the hospital where she worked, and about how happy she was when I was born." The image of Elena, grown into adulthood, sitting down regularly to write letters to a foster brother she hadn't seen in decades, preserving their connection through one-sided correspondence, was almost overwhelming. Marcus tried to imagine her as an adult nurse, caring for patients, married to someone she had met at work, becoming a mother herself, while still holding on to memories of their childhood bond. "She said she wrote about being scared when she got sick," Lily continued, her voice growing softer. "She said she wrote about wanting to make sure I would be okay if something happened to her. And she said the last letter was about finding your name in a magazine story about successful people and how proud she was that you had become someone important." Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that Elena had been watching his career from a distance, following his success through media coverage, maintaining her connection to him even when he had no idea she was still alive. The depth of her faithfulness to their childhood bond was staggering. "What happened to the letters?" Marcus asked. "Mama gave them to Tia Rosa before she went to the hospital the last time," Lily replied. "She said Tia Rosa should keep them safe in case I needed them someday." Over the following weeks, Marcus would track down Elena's aunt through a private investigator, eventually recovering the box of letters that Elena had written to him over the course of 26 years. Reading them would provide him with a complete picture of Elena's life. Her successful adoption by a loving family, her education as a registered nurse, her marriage to a kind man who had died in a car accident when Lily was 2, her diagnosis with cancer, and her final desperate search for the foster brother who had shown her what family could mean. But even before reading Elena's letters, Marcus understood the magnitude of what she had given him through Lily. Elena had preserved their connection across decades and vast distances, had raised her daughter with stories of their childhood bond, and had ultimately trusted him with the most precious thing in her world based on memories of shared food and quiet comfort during thunderstorms. As Marcus tucked Lily into bed that night, listening to her soft breathing and watching her small form curl around the faithful stuffed elephant, he realized that Elena had accomplished something extraordinary. She had taken 2 damaged children's instinctive care for each other and transformed it into a legacy that had survived decades of separation, creating a bridge across time that had ultimately reunited her family with his. For the first time in 34 years, Marcus Chen was no longer alone in the world. He had a daughter now, not biologically, but in every way that mattered, and through her, he had recovered the capacity for love that he had thought was lost forever in the wreckage of his foster care childhood. The fortress he had built around his heart was crumbling, replaced by something infinitely more valuable: A home filled with laughter, art projects, bedtime stories, and the daily miracle of caring for someone who needed him, not for his wealth or power, but simply because she was family. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus's penthouse as he sat at his kitchen table, watching Lily carefully arrange her cereal into neat rows before eating it. 3 weeks had passed since she had appeared in his elevator, and while their daily routines had settled into a comfortable rhythm, Marcus found himself increasingly haunted by questions about how Elena had known where to find him and why she had believed with such certainty that he would care for her daughter. Dr. Martinez had explained that children Lily's age often confused details or blended real memories with stories they had been told. But the specificity of Lily's knowledge about his childhood suggested something more complex than simple confusion. The songs Elena had taught her, the details about the Morrison foster home, the intimate understanding of his childhood fears, these weren't fragments that could be explained by imagination or wishful thinking. "Lily," Marcus said gently, setting down his coffee cup, "do you remember anything about the place where you lived before you came here?" Lily looked up from her cereal, milk dripping from her spoon as she considered the question. "With Mama? We lived in lots of places. Mama said we had to move when the rent got too high, or when people got mean about me not having a daddy." The casual mention of financial instability and social judgment hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena had struggled to provide for her daughter, moving frequently and facing the prejudices that single mothers often encountered. Meanwhile, he had been accumulating wealth in his sterile penthouse, completely unaware that the girl who had once comforted his childhood nightmares was facing hardships he could have easily resolved. "Do you remember the last place you lived with your mama?" Marcus pressed, his voice carefully controlled despite the emotion churning in his chest. Lily's expression grew thoughtful, her 4-year-old mind working to organize memories that were likely fragmented by trauma and time. The apartment was small, but it had a window where Mama grew flowers in pots. She said flowers made everything prettier, even sad places. She paused, spooning more cereal while accessing deeper memories. "Mama got skinny and tired a lot. She had to go to the doctor place many times, and Tia Rosa would come stay with me. Mama said the medicine was expensive, but flowers were cheap, so we should choose happy things when we could." Marcus felt his throat tighten at the image of Elena, ill and struggling financially, still trying to create beauty and hope for her daughter. The contrast between Elena's situation and his own abundant resources during her final months was almost unbearable to contemplate. "Do you remember Tia Rosa?" Marcus asked, recognizing that Elena's aunt might be crucial to understanding how Lily had ended up in his building. "Tia Rosa cried a lot after Mama went to heaven," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "She said she wanted to keep me, but the social worker people said she was too old and didn't have enough money. She gave me my elephant and said Mama wanted me to find someone special." The revelation that social services had been involved suggested that Elena's death had been recent and that there might be official records documenting Lily's placement. Marcus made a mental note to have his legal team investigate what had happened to Elena's arrangements for her daughter's care. "Did Tia Rosa tell you anything else about finding this special person?" Marcus asked. Lily nodded, her expression growing more serious. "She said Mama had a picture of a man from a magazine, and she kept it in her special box with all the letters. She said the man was someone Mama knew from when she was little, and Mama thought he might be my daddy." Marcus felt the world shift beneath him. Elena had kept a photograph of him from media coverage of his business success, preserving it alongside letters she had written but never sent. The implication was staggering. Elena had not only remembered their childhood connection, but had somehow come to believe that he was Lily's biological father. "Lily, did your mama ever tell you about meeting this man when you were alive? Not when she was little, but when she was grown up like she was when you knew her?" The question seemed to unlock a different set of memories. Lily's eyes brightened with sudden recollection. "Oh, Mama said she saw him at the big building where people wore fancy clothes and talked about important business. She said she was working there, helping sick people, and she saw him in the elevator." Marcus's mind raced through the implications. Elena had encountered him as an adult, during some kind of business event or medical consultation. Given her profession as a nurse and his company's extensive work in medical technology, there could have been numerous opportunities for their paths to cross without his awareness. "Do you remember anything else about that meeting?" Marcus asked, his analytical mind trying to piece together a timeline that would explain Elena's belief about his paternity. "Mama said she was scared to talk to him because he looked very important and busy," Lily continued, her voice growing softer as she accessed deeper memories. "But she said he smiled at her when the elevator door closed, and it was the same smile he had when they were little. She said that's when she knew for sure it was Marco." The detail about an elevator encounter sent chills down Marcus's spine. His daily routine involved dozens of elevator rides in various buildings around Manhattan, countless brief interactions with strangers that he dismissed without thought. Elena could have been any one of hundreds of medical professionals he had encountered during Chen Industries' expansion into healthcare technology. Marcus excused himself and retreated to his office, where he immediately called his head of security. "James, I need you to contact the best private investigator in the city. I want them here within the hour, and I want a complete background check on Elena Rodriguez, deceased, formerly a nurse, possibly encountered me during a business meeting in the past 5 years." While waiting for the investigator to arrive, Marcus found himself reviewing his calendar from the previous 5 years, searching for medical conferences, hospital consultations, or healthcare technology demonstrations where he might have unknowingly encountered Elena. The possibilities were numerous. Chen Industries had partnerships with dozens of medical facilities, and Marcus frequently attended industry events where healthcare professionals were present. The private investigator, Patricia Wells, arrived within 45 minutes. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had built her reputation by solving cases that others deemed impossible. Marcus had used her services before for corporate investigations, but never for anything as personal as tracing the history of a woman who had entrusted him with her child based on memories from foster care. "I need everything you can find about Elena Rodriguez," Marcus told her, providing what few details he had gathered from Lily's fragmented recollections. Date of death, cause of death, employment history, especially any connection to medical facilities or healthcare conferences in Manhattan. "I also need to know how her daughter ended up in my building without any record of entry." Patricia took careful notes, her expression revealing nothing about her thoughts regarding the unusual request. "Timeline for results?" "As quickly as possible without compromising thoroughness," Marcus replied. "This involves the welfare of a 4-year-old child who has no one else in the world." While Patricia began her investigation, Marcus returned to Lily, who had finished her breakfast and was now sitting in the living room, carefully brushing her stuffed elephant's matted fur with a small comb Marcus had purchased during one of their shopping expeditions. "Lily, I'm trying to understand how you got to my building the night I found you," Marcus said, settling beside her on the couch. "Do you remember anything about that day? About how you got there?" Lily's brushing motions slowed as she accessed memories that were clearly difficult to revisit. "Tia Rosa was crying because the social worker lady said I had to go to a new place with strangers. She said she tried to tell them about Mama's special person, but they didn't believe her because she didn't have papers." The mention of documentation suggested that Elena's wishes for her daughter's placement had not been legally formalized, leaving Rosa without standing to contest social services decisions. Marcus made another mental note to investigate what legal options might be available to regularize Lily's situation. "Tia Rosa said Mama made her promise to try one more thing if the social worker people wouldn't listen," Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said Mama showed her the picture from the magazine and told her the address of the big building where the man worked." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Elena had somehow obtained the address of Chen Industries, probably through the same magazine article that had featured his photograph. She had developed a plan for Rosa to bring Lily directly to him if official channels failed to place her daughter appropriately. "Did Tia Rosa bring you to my building?" Marcus asked gently. Lily nodded, tears beginning to form in her dark eyes. She was scared because the building was so big and fancy, and the security man wouldn't let us go upstairs. She tried to explain about Mama's special person, but he said we needed appointments and proper authorization. The image of Rosa, probably elderly and possibly not entirely fluent in English, trying to convince Chen Industries security to allow her access to the CEO based on a dying woman's desperate plan, was heartbreaking. Of course, they would have been turned away. Marcus's security protocols were designed to prevent exactly that kind of unauthorized access. Tia Rosa started crying, and the security man felt bad, so he let us sit in the lobby for a while. Lily continued. She said maybe Mama was wrong. Maybe the special person wouldn't want to help us after all. She said she didn't know what to do next. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining the desperation Rosa must have felt, carrying out a promise to a dying woman while facing the reality that her plan was failing. Elena had trusted that their childhood bond would compel him to care for her daughter, but she hadn't anticipated the practical barriers that wealth and success had created around his daily life. But then Tia Rosa saw the elevator doors open, and she said Mama must be watching from heaven because here was our chance, Lily said, her voice growing stronger with the memory. She picked me up and put me in the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. She said to wait there until the special person found me, because Mama said family always finds family. The revelation staggered Marcus. Rosa had essentially abandoned Lily in his elevator, trusting that Elena's plan would somehow work despite all evidence to the contrary. It was an act of faith so profound and desperate that Marcus could barely comprehend the courage it must have required. "Where did Tia Rosa go?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "She said goodbye and that she loved me, but she had to leave before the security people got angry," Lily replied, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "She said Mama promised that the special person would take care of me better than anyone else could, so I should be brave and wait for him to find me." Marcus pulled Lily into his arms, holding her gently as she cried for the aunt who had been forced to abandon her and the mother whose desperate plan had somehow succeeded against impossible odds. Rosa had gambled everything on Elena's faith, in a foster brother she hadn't seen for decades, and through a combination of determination, desperation, and extraordinary luck, Lily had indeed found her way to someone who would protect her. The next morning brought the first results of Patricia Wells's investigation. She arrived at the penthouse with a thick folder of documents and a grim expression that suggested the truth was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Elena Rodriguez, age 34, died 6 weeks ago at Mount Sinai Hospital from complications related to cervical cancer, Patricia began, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. Diagnosis came 15 months ago. Prognosis was poor from the beginning, due to late detection. Marcus absorbed the timeline with growing understanding. Elena had been dying while he was expanding Chen Industries' medical technology division, completely unaware that someone from his past was fighting a losing battle against the very diseases his algorithms were designed to detect. Employment history shows she worked as a registered nurse at several Manhattan hospitals over the past 8 years, Patricia continued, most recently at Presbyterian, specializing in pediatric oncology. Her supervisor described her as an exceptional nurse who was beloved by patients and families. The irony was almost unbearable. Elena had dedicated her professional life to helping children fight cancer while secretly battling the same disease herself, all while raising a daughter alone and apparently planning for a future she knew she wouldn't live to see. "Here's where it gets complicated," Patricia said, opening a section of her folder that contained photographs and building schematics. 3 years ago, Chen Industries partnered with Presbyterian Hospital to test CardioPredict software in their pediatric oncology ward. You attended a demonstration and toured the facilities with hospital administrators. Marcus felt his breath catch as Patricia handed him a photograph taken during that hospital visit. The image showed him standing in a group of medical professionals, listening to a presentation about early cancer detection in children. In the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, was Elena in her nurse's uniform, watching the proceedings with an expression of intense recognition. According to hospital records, Elena requested to attend that demonstration, even though it wasn't part of her usual duties, Patricia explained. She told her supervisor she was interested in learning about new diagnostic technologies. But based on what you've told me about your childhood connection, I suspect she recognized you and wanted to confirm your identity. Marcus stared at the photograph, trying to remember any details from that day that might have indicated Elena's presence. The hospital tour had been routine for him, another in a series of marketing presentations designed to expand Chen Industries' medical partnerships. He had no memory of noticing individual staff members or any interaction that would have stood out from dozens of similar events. "There's more," Patricia said, her tone growing more serious. "Elena made inquiries about you following that hospital visit. She spoke with several colleagues about the importance of making sure children had proper guardianship arrangements, and she specifically asked about procedures for identifying fathers who might not know about their children." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena had seen him at the hospital and somehow concluded that he might be Lily's father. Whether through wishful thinking, coincidental timing, or some other connection, she had convinced herself that their childhood bond had extended into an adult relationship that had produced her daughter. "Did you find any evidence of a romantic relationship between Elena and me?" Marcus asked, though he was certain no such relationship had existed. "None whatsoever," Patricia replied firmly. "But Elena's medical records show that Lily was conceived approximately 4 years and 3 months ago. The timeline coincides with a business trip you took to Guatemala for a Chen Industries medical technology conference." Marcus searched his memory for details of the Guatemala trip, which had been part of an initiative to expand healthcare technology access in developing nations. The conference had lasted 4 days and had included meetings with medical professionals from across Central and South America. Elena, with her nursing background and possible connections to healthcare organizations, could theoretically have been present at any number of events during that trip. Elena Rodriguez's medical records also show she took a vacation to Guatemala during the same week as your conference. Patricia continued. Hotel records confirm she stayed at the same resort where the conference was held. The circumstantial evidence was mounting, but Marcus remained certain that he had never had a romantic encounter with Elena during that trip or any other time. His memory of the Guatemala conference was clear. He had been focused entirely on business objectives, maintaining his usual professional distance from all participants. "There's something else," Patricia said, handing him another set of documents. Elena's personal effects included a journal she kept during her final months. Her Aunt Rosa provided access because she thought it might help explain Elena's wishes for her daughter. Marcus opened the journal with trembling hands, immediately recognizing Elena's careful handwriting from the childhood drawing she had given him so many years ago. The entries were dated from the period following her cancer diagnosis, when she was apparently making desperate plans for Lily's future care. March 15th. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. Lily is so young, she doesn't understand why Mama is sick all the time. I have to find a way to make sure she'll be safe when I'm gone. Rosa is too old and poor to fight social services for custody. I need to find him, I need to find Marco. Marcus continued reading, his chest tightening with each entry as Elena's desperation became more apparent. March 28th. I saw him today at the hospital, giving a presentation about computer programs that can detect cancer early. If those programs had existed 2 years ago, maybe I would have caught mine in time. He looks older, successful, but he smiled at a child in the hallway, and it was the same gentle smile I remember from when we were little. I know it's him, I know it's Marco. The entry confirmed that Elena had attended his hospital presentation and had recognized him from their childhood connection. But the following entries revealed the tragic misunderstanding that had shaped her final months. April 20. I've been thinking about Guatemala, about that conference where we were both staying at the same hotel. I was so nervous to approach him because he looked so important, so successful. But we talked by the pool one evening about his medical technology work, and he was kind to me, just like when we were children. I should have told him about Lily then, but I was scared he wouldn't remember me or care about a child from a brief encounter. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him as Elena's memories painted a picture of an encounter he had completely forgotten. He had indeed spoken with various conference attendees during evening social events, maintaining the professional courtesy that was expected at such gatherings. Elena could easily have been one of dozens of medical professionals he had conversed with briefly and then dismissed from memory. April 10th. I found the magazine article about his success with medical technology companies. Chen Industries, that's his company. He's saved so many lives with his innovations. Maybe he would want to know about Lily, about the life we created together during those few days in Guatemala. Maybe he would want to be her father if something happens to me. The tragic irony was becoming clear. Elena had constructed an entire narrative around a brief, professional conversation they had shared at a medical conference, interpreting his courtesy as romantic interest and his polite attention as a connection that had somehow produced her daughter. In her desperation to secure Lily's future, she had transformed a casual encounter into a love story that existed only in her memory. Marcus continued reading through entries that detailed Elena's increasingly frantic attempts to contact him as her health declined. She had written multiple letters that were never sent, researched his business schedule to find opportunities for approach, and eventually developed the plan that had led Rosa to bring Lily to his building. May 20th. The cancer is spreading faster than the doctors expected. I don't have time to find the right way to tell him about Lily. I've written everything down for Rosa, the address of his building, the photograph from the magazine, the stories about when we were children, so Lily will know who he is. If official channels won't help her, Rosa knows to bring her directly to him. Family takes care of family. He taught me that when we were 8 years old. The final entry was dated just days before Elena's death. June honest. I'm scared that I've made a terrible mistake, that maybe he won't remember me or won't care about a child he doesn't know is his. But Lily deserves a father who will protect her the way Marco protected me when we were little. Even if he rejects her, at least I'll have tried to give her the best possible chance at a family who will love her. I have to trust that the boy who shared his food and comforted my nightmares is still there, inside the successful man he became. Marcus closed the journal, overwhelmed by the tragic beauty of Elena's faith in a connection that was both real and imagined. Their childhood bond had been genuine and profound, but Elena's adult interpretation of their brief encounter in Guatemala was a desperate fiction created by a dying mother who was running out of options for her daughter's care. The DNA test that Marcus ordered 3 days later confirmed what he had already known. He was not Lily's biological father. But, as he read the results in his office while Lily played contentedly in the living room, Marcus realized that biology was irrelevant to what Elena had actually accomplished. She had found a way to reunite him with the capacity for love that he had lost when she left the Morrison foster home 34 years earlier. Through her daughter, Elena had given him the family he had never allowed himself to want, and she had given Lily a father who would never abandon her because he understood exactly what abandonment felt like. Patricia Wells's final report included details about Rosa's current location and financial situation, along with documentation of Elena's attempts to formalize her wishes for Lily's care. Rosa had tried to follow proper legal channels but had been overwhelmed by bureaucratic requirements and language barriers that prevented her from effectively advocating for her niece. Rosa is currently living with relatives in Queens, Patricia explained during their final meeting. She's been consumed with guilt about leaving Lily in the elevator, convinced that she failed Elena by not finding a better way to ensure your connection. She would be relieved to know that Lily is safe, and that Elena's plan ultimately succeeded. Marcus made arrangements to meet with Rosa the following week, bringing Lily to see the aunt who had risked everything to honor a dying woman's desperate wishes. The reunion was emotional for all involved, with Rosa weeping tears of relief and gratitude, while Lily introduced Marcus as the special person her mama had promised would take care of her. Through their conversation, Marcus learned additional details about Elena's final months and her unwavering faith in their childhood connection. Rosa confirmed that Elena had spoken constantly about Marco, telling Lily stories about their time together in foster care and insisting that he would provide the love and security that every child deserved. She never stopped believing in the boy who shared his food. Rosa told Marcus through tears, even when she was dying, even when the plan seemed impossible, She said Marco would keep his promise to take care of family. As Marcus held Lily in his arms during the drive back to their penthouse, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. Elena's misunderstanding about his paternity had been based on wishful thinking and desperate hope, but her faith in his character had been absolutely accurate. She had remembered the essential truth about their childhood bond, that love and family were choices rather than biological accidents, and that the boy who had protected her during thunderstorms would grow into a man who would move heaven and earth to protect her daughter. Elena's greatest gift to both Marcus and Lily wasn't the fictional love story she had constructed around their brief adult encounter, but the real love story she had preserved from their childhood, story of two lost children who had found family in each other and carried that connection across decades of separation until it could bloom again in the next generation. Through Lily, Elena had given Marcus not just a daughter to love, but the chance to finally come home to the part of himself he had locked away when she left the Morrison foster home. And through Marcus, Elena had given Lily something even more precious than biological parentage. A father who understood exactly what it meant to be unwanted and who would spend the rest of his life making sure she never felt that way again. The mystery was solved, but the real story was just beginning. The laboratory results arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier in a sealed envelope that Marcus held for several minutes before opening. The DNA testing facility had promised absolute discretion and rapid processing, but as he sat in his office overlooking Manhattan's skyline, Marcus found himself reluctant to break the seal that would either confirm or destroy the foundation of Elena's desperate plan. Lily was in the living room with her art supplies, creating what she called memory pictures, elaborate drawings that somehow captured Elena's stories about their childhood in vivid, impossible detail. She had become obsessed with these artistic recreations over the past week, as though Elena's memories were surfacing through her daughter's unconscious mind and demanding expression through crayon and colored pencil. Marcus opened the envelope with surgical precision, his hands steady, despite the emotional weight of what the results would reveal. The clinical language of the laboratory report cut through any possibility of misinterpretation. Probability of paternity, 0%. Marcus Chen is excluded as the biological father of Lily Elena Rodriguez with 99.99% certainty. He stared at the words until they blurred together, feeling a complex mixture of relief and unexpected disappointment. Relief, because the results confirmed what his memory had insisted was true. He had never had a romantic relationship with Elena that could have produced a child. Disappointment, because the test results meant that Lily's presence in his life was based on Elena's tragic misunderstanding rather than biological connection. Yet, as Marcus sat with the laboratory report in his hands, he realized that the absence of genetic relationship didn't diminish the profound bond that had developed between him and Lily over the past month. If anything, the knowledge that she had chosen to love him, that Elena had chosen to entrust her with him, made their connection more precious, not less. Marco? Lily's voice came from the doorway, her small form silhouetted against the hallway light. Are you sad about something? Marcus looked up to find her watching him with the intuitive concern that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. She seemed to possess an uncanny ability to read his emotional state, responding to shifts in his mood with the same protective instinct that had once driven him to comfort Elena during childhood nightmares. I'm not sad exactly, Marcus said, setting the DNA report aside and opening his arms. Lily crossed the room and climbed into his lap with the easy trust that had developed between them, her small body warm against his chest. I'm thinking about complicated things that don't have simple answers. Mama said thinking too hard about complicated things can make your heart hurt, Lily observed, settling against him with her stuffed elephant clutched securely in her arms. She said sometimes the important things are simple, but grown-ups make them complicated because simple things can be scary. The wisdom of Elena's parenting philosophy, filtered through her daughter's innocent understanding, struck Marcus with its fundamental truth. He had spent his entire adult life complicating relationships, building elaborate defensive structures around his heart to avoid the simple terror of caring about someone who might leave. Your mama was very smart, Marcus said, stroking Lily's dark hair. What else did she tell you about simple things that grown-ups make complicated? Lily tilted her head, accessing memories with the concentrated expression that appeared whenever she was retrieving Elena's teachings. She said family isn't about where you come from, it's about who takes care of you when you're scared. She said love isn't about having the same blood, it's about choosing to stay even when things get hard. The words hit Marcus like lightning, illuminating connections his analytical mind had been struggling to process. Elena hadn't chosen him as Lily's guardian because she believed he was her biological father. She had chosen him because she understood that family was something you built rather than something you inherited. Lily, Marcus said carefully, did your mama ever tell you stories about when she was little, before you were born? Lily nodded enthusiastically, her eyes brightening with the anticipation of sharing cherished memories. Lots of stories. She said when she was a little girl, she lived in a big house with other children who didn't have mamas and daddies. She said it was scary sometimes, but then a boy named Marco came to live there too, and he made her feel safe. Marcus felt his breath catch, as Lily began recounting Elena's memories with startling clarity. Mama said Marco was older than her, and he was very serious because he had to take care of himself. But he shared his food with her when she was hungry, and he taught her that just because other people didn't want them didn't mean they weren't worth loving. The accuracy of Lily's recollection was staggering. She was describing events from 34 years ago with details that could only have come from Elena's careful preservation of their shared experiences. Every word confirmed that their childhood bond had been as profound for Elena as it had been for Marcus, though he had spent decades convincing himself it had been merely a temporary convenience. What else did your mama tell you about Marco? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She said he had nightmares sometimes about people leaving him, so she would sing to him until he felt better, Lily continued, her small hand tracing patterns on Marcus's shirt as she spoke. She said he taught her about being brave when you're scared, about helping other people even when you don't have much to give. Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that Elena had built her entire understanding of love and family around their 6-month connection. She had carried his 8-year-old kindnesses with her through decades of adult life, transforming his childhood survival strategies into a blueprint for raising her own daughter. Mama said Marco was the most important person in her whole life, even though she only knew him for a little while, Lily said, her voice growing softer as she shared Elena's most intimate feelings. She said some people come into your life and change everything about who you are, even if they can't stay forever. The revelation struck Marcus with devastating clarity. He hadn't simply been Elena's foster brother or childhood friend, he had been her introduction to the concept that love could exist without conditions, that protection could be offered without expectation of return, that family could be chosen rather than endured. Did your mama tell you why she thought I was your daddy? Marcus asked, struggling to understand how Elena had connected their childhood bond to Lily's parentage. Lily's expression grew more serious, as though she understood the weight of the information she was about to share. Mama said she saw you at the hospital where she worked, and you looked just like Marco but grown up. She said she remembered you from when you both went to the conference, in the place with palm trees, and you talked about helping sick children with computer programs. The Guatemala conference. Marcus now understood how Elena had constructed her narrative around their brief professional interaction. She had recognized him from their childhood connection, approached him during the social events, and later convinced herself that their conversation had been romantic rather than purely professional. But Mama said even if you weren't my real daddy, you were still family because you taught her what family means, Lily continued. She said blood doesn't make family, choosing to love someone makes family. And she chose you before I was even born. The words resonated through Marcus's chest like struck crystal, revealing truths he had been too frightened to acknowledge. Elena hadn't entrusted him with Lily because of mistaken paternity. She had chosen him because she recognized in the successful adult the same capacity for love that the 8-year-old boy had shown her during the worst period of her childhood. Lily, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he could no longer control, do you understand what this means? About us? About why you're here? Lily looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes that held far too much wisdom for a 4-year-old child. Mama said you would take care of me because taking care of people is who you are, even when you try to pretend it isn't. She said you might have forgotten how to love people because grown-ups sometimes forget important things, but I would help you remember. The simple statement contained such profound understanding of his emotional journey that Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. Elena had seen through the fortress of success and emotional isolation he had constructed, recognizing that the capacity for love he had demonstrated as a child was still there, buried beneath decades of self-protection, but not destroyed. Your mama was right, Marcus admitted, pulling Lily closer against his chest. I had forgotten how to love people, but you did help me remember. That evening, as Marcus tucked Lily into bed with the elaborate ritual they had developed over the past month, 3 stories, 2 songs, and 1 detailed discussion of the next day's planned activities, he found himself marveling at how completely his life had been transformed by a 4-year-old child who wasn't biologically related to him, but who had somehow become the center of his universe. Marco? Lily said as he was turning off the bedside lamp. Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to keep me forever, even though I'm not really your little girl? The question pierced through Marcus's emotional defenses with surgical precision. In Lily's simple words, he heard echoes of his own childhood. Fears the terror that love was conditional, that protection was temporary, that belonging was a privilege that could be revoked without warning. Marcus sat back down on the edge of her bed, taking her small hand in his larger one. Lily, you are really my little girl. Not because we share DNA, but because I choose you, and you choose me. That's what makes a family choosing to love each other and promising to stay together no matter what happens. Like how Mama chose you to be my daddy, even though you weren't my first daddy, Lily asked, her voice brightening with understanding. Exactly like that, Marcus confirmed. Your mama knew that the most important kind of family is the kind you choose, and I choose you, Lily Elena Rodriguez. I choose to be your father, to take care of you, to love you, and to make sure you never feel unwanted or alone. And I choose you too, Lily said solemnly, as though they were exchanging formal vows. I choose you to be my Marco daddy, even though you're not the daddy who made me with Mama. The term Marco daddy struck Marcus as perfect, acknowledging both their unique connection and his relationship to Elena's memory, while creating something entirely new that belonged only to them. The following morning brought a phone call that would complete Marcus's understanding of Elena's carefully orchestrated plan. Dr. Martinez, Lily's child psychologist, had been working with Elena's former supervisor at Presbyterian Hospital to access additional records that might shed light on Lily's psychological needs and Elena's final arrangements. Marcus, I've discovered something remarkable, Dr. Martinez said, her voice carrying an excitement that suggested significant findings. Elena didn't just recognize you at the hospital demonstration 3 years ago, she specifically requested assignment to our pediatric oncology ward after seeing your presentation about early cancer detection. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the implications became clear. She sought out your department because of my connection to the diagnostic software? More than that, Dr. Martinez explained. Elena spent the final 2 years of her career working exclusively with children who had cancer, and according to her colleagues, she frequently mentioned a technology innovator who was revolutionizing pediatric diagnostics. She told other nurses that she had known this person as a child, and that his work was proof that people who experienced early trauma could grow up to save lives. The revelation staggered Marcus. Elena hadn't simply recognized him and constructed a romantic fantasy around their brief adult encounter. She had deliberately restructured her entire professional life around his work, finding purpose and meaning in the knowledge that the boy who had once comforted her was now developing technologies that could save children like the ones she cared for. There's something else, Dr. Martinez continued. Elena kept detailed notes about her patients' responses to early detection protocols. Her supervisor said she was obsessed with documenting how Chen Industries' diagnostic algorithms affected treatment outcomes and survival rates. She was essentially conducting informal research on the real-world impact of your innovations. Marcus found himself struggling to process the depth of Elena's connection to his work. While he had been viewing his medical technology ventures as successful business expansions, Elena had been experiencing them as personal validation that their childhood bond had produced something meaningful for the world. "Did she ever try to contact me directly through the hospital?" Marcus asked. "According to her supervisor, Elena drafted multiple letters to you over the years, but never sent them." "Dr. Martinez replied. "She was apparently convinced that you wouldn't remember her, or that contacting you would be inappropriate given your professional status." The tragic irony was almost unbearable. Elena had been following his career, working with his technologies, and raising her daughter with stories of their connection, while Marcus had remained completely unaware that someone from his deepest past was watching his success and finding hope in it. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 weeks earlier. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the remainder of the week, then took Lily on what he described as a memory expedition to visit the places that had shaped their shared history. Their first stop was the Morrison Foster Home in Queens, now converted into a community center but still recognizable from Marcus's childhood memories. As they stood on the sidewalk outside the brick building, Marcus found himself seeing the structure through Lily's eyes, not as a place of institutional care and emotional deprivation, but as the setting where two lost children had found each other and created the foundation for everything that followed. "This is where Mama lived with you when she was little?" Lily asked, studying the building with the same analytical attention she applied to her memory pictures. "For 6 months," Marcus confirmed, surprised by how small the building looked compared to his childhood memories. "The happiest 6 months of my childhood, though I didn't realize it at the time." They walked around the neighborhood, Marcus pointing out the corner store where he and Elena had sometimes been allowed to buy penny candy, the park where they had played on weekends, the school they had both attended during Elena's brief residency. With each location, Marcus found himself accessing memories he had buried for decades, seeing his past through the lens of Elena's preservation rather than his own defensive forgetting. "Mama said you taught her how to be brave at the school?" Lily observed as they sat on the playground swings. "She said the other kids were mean to her because she talked funny, but you told them to stop or you would make them sorry." Marcus remembered the incident clearly now, a group of older children taunting Elena about her accent and her second-hand clothes. His intervention hadn't been particularly heroic. He had simply told them that Elena was his sister and that anyone who bothered her would have to deal with him. But to a 7-year-old girl who had never had anyone defend her, the gesture had apparently been transformative. "Your mama was very brave all by herself," Marcus said, giving Lily's swing a gentle push. "I just reminded her that she didn't have to face mean people alone." "Is that what families do?" Lily asked. "Remind each other that they're not alone?" "That's exactly what families do," Marcus replied, understanding with perfect clarity why Elena had entrusted him with her daughter. She had recognized that beneath his successful exterior, he was still the boy who had instinctively understood that no child should have to face the world without protection. Their final stop was the cemetery where Elena was buried, a modest section of Queens where her headstone bore the simple inscription, "Elena Rodriguez, beloved mother." Marcus had brought flowers, the same type of daisies that Elena had grown in pots during her final months, according to Lily's memories. As they stood beside Elena's grave, Lily chatted conversationally with her mother, updating her on their life together and assuring her that Marcus was taking good care of her just as she had promised. "Marco Daddy bought me new art supplies, and I made you a picture of the yellow kitchen where you lived together," she told the headstone. "He remembers the creaky stairs, just like you said he would." Marcus found himself speaking to Elena as well, though his words were silent and directed inward. "I understand now what you were trying to tell me," he thought. Family isn't about biology or legal documents or meeting society's expectations. It's about choosing to love someone completely, protecting them fiercely, and promising to stay even when everything else in the world is uncertain. As they prepared to leave the cemetery, Lily placed her small hand in Marcus's and looked up at him with an expression of absolute trust. "Mama said she wasn't sad about going to heaven because she knew I would find my real family," she said. "She said you would love me the way she loved you when you were little, not because you had to, but because that's who you are." That evening, Marcus made the most important business decision of his career. He restructured Chen Industries to establish a foundation dedicated to improving diagnostic technology access for underserved populations, with a particular focus on early cancer detection in pediatric patients. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation would ensure that the medical innovations Elena had spent her final years documenting would reach the children who needed them most. But more significantly, Marcus began the legal process of adopting Lily permanently, not because he felt obligated by Elena's final wishes, but because he couldn't imagine his life without the small person who had taught him that love was a choice rather than a biological accident. The paperwork was extensive, requiring background checks, psychological evaluations, and home studies that documented his fitness as a single parent. Marcus approached the process with the same methodical intensity he had once applied to hostile takeovers, except this time his goal wasn't acquisition but rather the legal recognition of a bond that already existed. Dr. Martinez served as a key witness throughout the adoption proceedings, testifying that Lily's attachment to Marcus was healthy and secure and that his care had been exemplary from the moment she entered his life. "This is a child who has found her home," she told the family court judge, "and a man who has discovered his capacity for unconditional love." 3 months after finding Lily in his elevator, Marcus stood in a Manhattan courthouse holding adoption papers that would make their family legally official. Lily wore a new dress, purchased specifically for the occasion, bright yellow, like the kitchen where her mother had first learned what family could mean. "Do you understand what this means, sweetheart?" Marcus asked as they left the courthouse with their new legal status confirmed. "It means you're my real daddy now, even though I didn't grow in your tummy," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "And it means I'm your real daughter, even though I don't look like you. Mama said that's the best kind of family, the kind where people choose each other on purpose." As they walked through Central Park afterward, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. Elena's desperate plan had been based on mistaken assumptions about his paternity, but her deeper understanding of his character had been absolutely accurate. She had recognized that the boy who had shared his food and offered protection during thunderstorms would grow into a man capable of loving her daughter completely. The DNA test had confirmed that Marcus wasn't Lily's biological father, but biology had proven irrelevant to the family they had created together. Love, Marcus had learned, wasn't about genetic connection or legal obligation. It was about the daily choice to care for someone's welfare above your own, to protect them from the world's cruelties, and to provide the security that every child deserved. That evening, as Marcus tucked his legally adopted daughter into bed in their penthouse home, he realized that Elena had given him something far more valuable than biological parentage. She had given him the chance to heal the wounded 8-year-old boy who had never stopped believing that love was temporary and that caring about people only led to abandonment. Through Lily, Elena had completed a circle of love that had begun 34 years earlier in a foster home where 2 lost children had found family in each other. The boy who had comforted Elena's nightmares had grown into a man who could provide Lily with the security and unconditional love that every child deserved. "Marco, Daddy?" Lily said as he was turning off her bedside lamp. "Yes, Princess?" "Thank you for remembering how to love me." Marcus kissed her forehead gently, his heart full to overflowing with gratitude for the extraordinary gift Elena had given them both. "Thank you for teaching me that some families are worth waiting 34 years to find." As he watched Lily drift off to sleep, clutching her faithful stuffed elephant in the bedroom that had been transformed from sterile guest space into a warm, colorful sanctuary filled with art supplies and books and toys, Marcus understood that Elena's greatest achievement hadn't been finding him, had been trusting that the capacity for love they had shared as children was strong enough to survive decades of separation and bloom again in the next generation. The fortress he had built around his heart had been dismantled, not by force, but by the gentle persistence of a 4-year-old child who had needed him to remember that some things were more important than protecting yourself from pain. Love, family, and the promise to stay. These were the gifts Elena had preserved across time and distance, delivered to him through her daughter's innocent trust. Marcus Chen was no longer alone in the world. He had a daughter who chose him daily, just as he chose her. And, through their chosen family, he had finally come home to the part of himself he had locked away when Elena left the Morrison foster home all those years ago. The truth had been revealed. Family wasn't about DNA or biology or meeting society's expectations. Family was about recognizing the person who would love you through your worst moments, protect you from life's cruelties, and choose to stay when everything else felt temporary. Elena had been right about everything that mattered. And Lily would grow up knowing that she was wanted, chosen, and loved completely, not because she shared his blood, but because she had become the most important person in his world. The circle was complete, the promise was fulfilled, and the family Elena had dreamed of for her daughter had finally found its way home. The morning of the adoption finalization dawned crisp and clear, Manhattan's autumn skyline painted in shades of gold that seemed to promise new beginnings. Marcus stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with hands that trembled slightly, not from nervousness about the legal proceedings, but from the profound realization that after 43 years of emotional isolation, he was about to officially become someone's father. In the next room, he could hear Lily humming one of Elena's lullabies while getting dressed in the special outfit they had chosen together for the courthouse ceremony. She had insisted on yellow, like the kitchen, where Mama learned about families, and had spent the previous evening practicing how to say, "Yes, Your Honor," when the judge asked if she wanted Marcus to be her legal father. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal paperwork, psychological evaluations, and home studies that had scrutinized every aspect of Marcus's life and fitness as a parent. He had approached the process with the same methodical intensity that had built his business empire, except this time, the stakes weren't measured in market share or quarterly profits, but in the welfare of a small child who had already become the center of his universe. Dr. Martinez had served as a crucial advocate throughout the proceedings, providing detailed assessments of Lily's emotional stability and Marcus's parenting capabilities. "This is a case where biology is irrelevant," she had testified to the court. Appointed social worker. Marcus and Lily have formed a healthy, secure attachment that serves both their psychological needs. She has found safety and unconditional love, and he has discovered his capacity for nurturing care. The social worker's final home visit had taken place the previous week, with Lily proudly giving the woman a tour of what she now called our home, rather than Marcus's apartment. The sterile penthouse had undergone a remarkable transformation over the months since Lily's arrival, evolving from a museum of expensive objects into a space that actually felt lived in and loved. The formal living room now featured a corner dedicated to Lily's art supplies, where she created elaborate drawings that Marcus had professionally framed and hung throughout the apartment. The pristine white sofas bore the gentle wear marks of daily use juice spills that had been cleaned but left barely visible shadows, small handprints on the cushions, the comfortable indentations left by countless hours of reading together. Lily's bedroom had been the most dramatic transformation. What had once been a sterile guest room with neutral colors and unused furniture had become a warm sanctuary filled with books, toys, and the kind of cheerful clutter that indicated a child who felt secure enough to spread her belongings throughout her space. The walls displayed her memory, picture as those remarkable drawings that somehow captured Elena's stories about their childhood with uncanny accuracy. "Ready, Marco Daddy?" Lily appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, resplendent in her yellow dress and matching hair ribbon. She had taken to calling him Marco Daddy as a way of honoring both their unique connection and his new parental role, and the term never failed to make Marcus's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Ready, Princess," Marcus replied, straightening his own tie one final time. The courthouse ceremony would be brief, a legal formality to recognize what had already become reality in their daily lives, but its significance was profound for both of them. As they rode through Manhattan in the back of Marcus's car, Lily chattered excitedly about the celebration they had planned for afterward. Lunch at her favorite restaurant, followed by a visit to the toy store where she would be allowed to choose anything she wanted as an adoption day present. Marcus listened to her planning with amusement, marveling at how completely his priorities had shifted over the past months. 6 months ago, his biggest concern had been quarterly earnings reports and market position relative to competitors. Now, his most important decision of the day was whether Lily's adoption celebration should include chocolate cake or vanilla, and whether the toy store visit should happen before or after they stopped at the park to feed the ducks she had befriended during their weekend walks. The courthouse ceremony itself was simple but profound. Judge Patricia Williams, a kind-faced woman with gray hair and warm eyes, had clearly been moved by the case file documenting Marcus and Lily's journey together. She spoke directly to Lily first, asking if she understood what adoption meant and whether she truly wanted Marcus to become her legal father. "Yes, Your Honor," Lily replied, with the careful pronunciation she had practiced. "I want Marco Daddy to be my real daddy forever, even when I'm grown up. He takes good care of me, and he doesn't get mad when I make mistakes or ask too many questions." Judge Williams smiled, then turned to Marcus. "Mr. Chen, do you understand the responsibilities you're accepting by adopting Lily? The legal and emotional obligations that will bind you to her welfare for the rest of your life?" "I understand, Your Honor," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "And I accept those responsibilities gladly. Lily has already been my daughter in every way that matters for months. This ceremony simply makes our family official. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of New York," Judge Williams declared, "I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Marcus Chen, you are now the legal father of Lily Elena Chen. Congratulations to both of you on your new family." The sound of Lily's new last name, Lily Elena Chen, sent chills down Marcus's spine. She was no longer Lily Rodriguez, the abandoned child who had appeared in his elevator like something from a fairy tale. She was Lily Chen, his daughter, with all the rights and protections that legal relationship provided. As they left the courthouse with their official adoption certificate, Marcus felt something shift fundamentally in his understanding of himself. He was no longer Marcus Chen, the ruthless businessman who had built an empire through emotional detachment and calculated risk assessment. He was Marcus Chen, father of Lily, a man whose most important responsibility was nurturing the growth and happiness of a small person who depended on him completely. The celebration lunch at Lily's favorite family restaurant was a joyous affair, with the staff bringing out a special cake decorated with "Congratulations on your new family" in bright frosting letters. Lily insisted on saving a piece for Mama in heaven, explaining to anyone who would listen that her birth mother had chosen Marcus specifically to be her new daddy because he was the best person she had ever known. But it was during their visit to the toy store afterward that Marcus experienced the most profound moment of the day. As Lily wandered the aisles, overwhelmed by the choices available for her special adoption gift, she eventually returned to him with a simple stuffed elephant, not expensive or elaborate, but clearly chosen with careful thought. "This one looks like my elephant," she explained, holding up the toy for his inspection. "So my elephant won't be lonely anymore. Families should stick together." The innocent wisdom of her choice, selecting a companion for her treasured possession rather than something entirely new for herself, encapsulated everything that Elena had understood about love and family. Lily's first impulse, even when given unlimited options, was to care for something that was already important to her, rather than accumulating new possessions. That evening, as they prepared for bed in their officially legal home, Marcus found himself reflecting on how completely his life had been transformed by a 4-year-old child who had taught him that love was a choice rather than a genetic accident. The DNA test might have proven that he wasn't Lily's biological father, but biology had proven irrelevant to the family they had created together. "Marco, Daddy?" Lily said, as he tucked her into bed with her 2 elephants arranged carefully beside her pillow. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for choosing me back when Mama sent me to find you. Some grown-ups might have sent me away because I wasn't really theirs." The words pierced through Marcus's emotional defenses with their simple honesty. "Lily, you were always really mine, from the moment you called me Marco in that elevator. Biology doesn't make family, love makes family. And I love you more than anything in this world." As he watched his legally adopted daughter drift off to sleep, Marcus understood that Elena's greatest gift hadn't been simply placing Lily in his care. She had given him the opportunity to heal the wounded 8-year-old boy who had never stopped believing that love was temporary and that caring about people only led to abandonment. The transformation of Marcus's personal life was paralleled by equally dramatic changes in his professional priorities. Within weeks of Lily's arrival, he had begun questioning the philosophical foundations of Chen Industries and his own role as a leader who had built success through emotional detachment and ruthless efficiency. The turning point came during a board meeting 6 months after the adoption, when Marcus found himself reviewing quarterly reports that included layoffs at one of their subsidiary companies. The recommendation was strategically sound. Eliminating redundant positions would improve profit margins and streamline operations. But as Marcus stared at the list of employees whose lives would be disrupted by his signature, he could only think about Lily's innocent question from the previous evening. "Marco, Daddy, why do some companies fire people right before Christmas? Don't they know that makes families sad?" She had overheard a conversation between him and his CFO about year-end cost reductions, and her 4-year-old logic had cut directly to the human impact of business decisions that Marcus had always considered purely financial matters. The realization that his daughter was watching his professional choices and learning about leadership from his example forced him to confront the disconnect between the father he wanted to be and the CEO he had always been. "I want to propose a different approach to our cost management strategy," Marcus announced to the surprised board members. "Instead of eliminating positions, I want to explore retraining programs that allow affected employees to transition into growth areas within the company. We'll absorb the short-term costs in exchange for long-term loyalty and improved morale." The proposal was met with skeptical murmurs from board members who had grown accustomed to Marcus's historically ruthless approach to efficiency optimization. But Marcus pressed forward, outlining a comprehensive plan that prioritized employee welfare alongside shareholder returns. "Our success has always been built on the talents of our people," he explained. "If we're going to grow sustainably, we need to invest in those people rather than treating them as disposable resources. My daughter recently reminded me that every job we eliminate represents a family whose security we're disrupting. I want Chen Industries to be known for creating opportunities, not destroying them." The philosophical shift represented a fundamental departure from the business practices that had built Marcus's empire, but it also reflected his growing understanding that true success couldn't be measured solely in financial terms. Lily's presence in his life had taught him that the most valuable achievements were measured in relationships, trust, and the positive impact he could have on other people's lives. Over the following months, Marcus systematically restructured Chen Industries to align with his evolving values. The company's research and development budget was redirected toward projects with humanitarian applications, particularly in medical technology that could serve underserved populations. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation, established in memory of Lily's mother, became the vehicle for ensuring that diagnostic innovations reached children who needed them most. The Foundation's mission statement, written by Marcus but inspired by Elena's legacy, declared their commitment to transforming technological innovation into tools for healing, ensuring that every child has access to life-saving medical care regardless of their family's financial circumstances. But the most significant change in Marcus's leadership style was his approach to employee relationships. The man who had once fired staff members through email notifications began implementing open-door policies that encouraged direct communication between management and workers at every level. Monthly company meetings became forums for employees to share concerns, suggest improvements, and participate in strategic planning decisions. Our company's strength comes from the collective wisdom of everyone who works here, Marcus told his executive team during one of their weekly planning sessions. For too long, I've been making decisions in isolation, assuming that leadership meant having all the answers. My daughter has taught me that asking questions and listening to other people's perspectives leads to better solutions than trying to solve everything yourself. The cultural transformation at Chen Industries didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without challenges. Some longtime employees were skeptical of Marcus's apparent personality change, wondering if his newfound compassion was genuine or simply a strategic adaptation to changing market expectations. Several board members resigned in protest of what they considered his soft approach to business management. But the results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements in morale and job security. Productivity increased as workers felt more invested in company success. Customer retention improved as Chen Industries' reputation evolved from efficient but ruthless to innovative and socially responsible. Most importantly, the company's humanitarian technology initiatives began producing innovations that saved lives in ways that had never been possible when profit was the only consideration. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation partnered with hospitals in developing nations to implement early detection protocols that identified serious conditions in children who might otherwise have gone undiagnosed until it was too late to help them. At home, Marcus's transformation was even more pronounced. The sterile penthouse that had once served as his fortress of emotional isolation became a warm family home filled with the sounds of Lily's laughter, the clutter of art projects and homework assignments, and the comfortable rhythms of daily life shared with someone he loved unconditionally. Evenings that had once been spent reviewing financial reports and strategic plans were now dedicated to homework help, bedtime stories, and the kind of meandering conversations that revealed how a 4-year-old mind processed the complexities of the adult world. Marcus discovered that Lily's innocent questions often led to insights about business challenges that his high-priced consultants had missed entirely. "Why do sick people have to pay money to get better?" she asked one evening as they reviewed foundation reports together. "Shouldn't helping sick people be free because it's the right thing to do?" Her question sparked a series of discussions that ultimately led to Chen Industries developing a sliding-scale pricing model for medical technology, ensuring that diagnostic tools were accessible to hospitals serving low-income populations. The innovation was initially costly but proved to be excellent marketing strategy, as well as moral imperative. Hospitals appreciated working with a company that understood their mission to serve all patients regardless of ability to pay. Lily's influence on Marcus's thinking extended beyond business philosophy to personal growth that addressed the emotional wounds he had carried since childhood. Dr. Martinez continued working with both of them, helping Marcus understand how his abandonment issues had shaped his adult relationships and teaching him healthier approaches to trust and vulnerability. "You've spent your entire adult life protecting yourself from the kind of rejection you experienced as a child," Dr. Martinez explained during one of their family therapy sessions. "But Lily represents proof that love doesn't always end in abandonment. She chose you, just as you chose her, and that choice is renewed every day you spend together." The healing process wasn't always smooth. Marcus struggled with anxiety about Lily's welfare that sometimes manifested as overprotectiveness, worrying constantly about potential threats to her safety and happiness. He hired bodyguards for her school trips, installed extensive security systems in their home, and researched every person who came into contact with her daily life. "Marco, Daddy, you're being a worrywart again," Lily observed one evening when she noticed him checking the locks on their front door for the 3rd time. "Mama said worrying too much about bad things happening can make you forget to enjoy good things that are happening right now." Her gentle correction, delivered with Elena's wisdom but Lily's innocent directness, reminded Marcus that his job was to keep her safe without transferring his own fears onto her childhood experience. Learning to balance protection with trust became an ongoing challenge that required constant attention and adjustment. As Lily grew older and more articulate, she began asking more complex questions about their family history and Elena's decision to send her to find Marcus. They developed a ritual of memory nights, when they would look through the letters Elena had written over the years, sharing stories about her life and discussing how her experiences had shaped the mother she became. "Mama wrote that she hoped you would teach me about being strong when things are hard," Lily said one evening as they read through Elena's correspondence. "She said you were the bravest person she ever knew because you took care of other people even when you were scared yourself." The letters revealed Elena's deep understanding of Marcus's character and her faith in his capacity for love, despite the emotional walls he had constructed around his heart. Her final entries, written during her illness, expressed gratitude for the childhood connection that had given her hope during the darkest periods of her adult life. "Marco taught me that families can be chosen," Elena had written. "If anything happens to me, I trust that he will teach Lily the same lesson, that love is stronger than biology, that protection comes from commitment rather than obligation, and that the best families are the ones where people choose each other every single day." The wisdom of Elena's insights became the foundation for Marcus and Lily's relationship as she moved through the developmental milestones of childhood. When she struggled with friendships at school, they talked about Elena's belief that the right people would appreciate her exactly as she was. When she faced academic challenges, they discussed how Elena had overcome educational disadvantages through persistence and determination. But perhaps most significantly, Elena's letters provided guidance for Marcus's ongoing transformation as a father and leader. Her descriptions of his childhood kindness helped him understand that his capacity for compassion hadn't been destroyed by foster care trauma, had simply been buried beneath layers of self-protection that were no longer necessary. 5 years after Lily's adoption, Marcus stood in the conference room of the Elena Rodriguez Foundation, addressing an international assembly of medical professionals, child welfare advocates, and philanthropists who had gathered to learn about their innovative approaches to family reunification and orphan care. The foundation had grown beyond his wildest expectations, operating programs in 23 countries and serving thousands of children who had been separated from families or left without parents due to war, poverty, or disease. Their medical diagnostic programs had detected early-stage illnesses in over 40 children, while their family reunification services had successfully connected 200 orphaned children with relatives who had been previously impossible to locate. "When we began this work," Marcus told the assembled delegates, "I thought our mission was simply to provide medical technology to underserved populations. But we quickly learned that healing extends far beyond physical health. Children need families, they need security, and they need adults who will choose to love them regardless of their biological connections." In the audience, 8-year-old Lily sat beside Patricia Wells, the private investigator who had become a close family friend and now served on the Foundation's board of directors. Lily had insisted on attending the conference despite the complex subject matter, explaining that she wanted to understand how their work helped other children find families the way she had found Marcus. "Our most successful interventions combine medical care with emotional support and family preservation," Marcus continued, his presentation illustrated with photographs of children who had been reunited with relatives or placed in loving adoptive homes. "We've learned that the best outcomes occur when we address the whole child, their physical health, their emotional security, and their fundamental need for belonging." The transformation of Marcus's public speaking style reflected his personal growth over the past 5 years. Where he had once delivered presentations with cold efficiency designed to maximize business outcomes, he now spoke with genuine passion about work that had become his life's purpose rather than simply his profession. After the conference concluded, Marcus and Lily walked through Central Park together, reviewing the day's events and discussing the stories they had heard from Foundation partners around the world. This had become one of their favorite traditions, processing complex experiences through conversations that helped Lily understand the broader context of their humanitarian work while giving Marcus insights into how their efforts appeared through a child's perspective. Did you know there are children in other countries who don't have homes like ours? Lily asked, as they paused beside the pond where they had fed ducks during the early months of their relationship. Yes, sweetheart. That's why we do the foundation work to help those children find families who will love and protect them. Lily nodded thoughtfully, then looked up at Marcus with an expression of sudden understanding. Like how Mama found you for me. Except we help children find their families before their mamas have to go to heaven. The innocent accuracy of her assessment took Marcus's breath away. In 8-year-old terms, she had captured exactly what the Elena Rodriguez Foundation was designed to accomplish, preventing the kind of desperate circumstances that had forced Elena to make contingency plans for her daughter's care. That's exactly right, Marcus confirmed. We try to help children stay with their families when possible, or find new families when necessary, so no child has to feel alone and unwanted like Mama and I did when we were little. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text message from Dr. Martinez, who had become a close friend as well as professional consultant to their family. She was requesting an urgent meeting to discuss a case that had recently come to the Foundation's attention, a 7-year-old girl named Sophia, whose mother had died in a car accident, leaving her in the care of an elderly grandmother, who was struggling with poverty and health issues. The situation is remarkably similar to Elena's final arrangements for Lily. Dr. Martinez explained when they met at her office the following morning. The grandmother loves Sophia deeply, but recognizes that she may not be able to provide adequate care much longer. She's specifically requesting assistance, finding a family that would welcome an older child and maintain contact with her as Sophia's remaining biological relative. Marcus listened to the details with growing recognition of patterns that had become familiar through their foundation work. Sophia's story echoed countless others they had encountered: children caught between biological families who couldn't provide adequate care and foster systems that prioritized younger, more easily placeable children. What makes this case unique, Dr. Martinez continued, is that Sophia's grandmother specifically mentioned wanting to find a family like yours, people who understand that love creates stronger bonds than biology, and who would help Sophia maintain her cultural identity while providing the security and opportunities she deserves. As Marcus reviewed Sophia's case file, he found himself remembering his own childhood experiences in foster care and the profound difference Elena's brief presence had made in his understanding of what family could mean. The Foundation's work had exposed him to hundreds of similar stories, but something about Sophia's situation resonated with particular intensity. I'd like to meet them, Marcus said finally. Both Sophia and her grandmother. Not necessarily as potential adoptive family, but as representatives of the Foundation who might be able to help them navigate their options. The meeting took place the following week in the modest Queens apartment where Sophia lived with her grandmother, Maria Santos. The space was clean but sparse, filled with the kind of careful organization that indicated people making the most of limited resources. Sophia herself was a quiet child, with enormous dark eyes that reminded Marcus painfully of Lily, at the same age watchful, guarded, clearly accustomed to adult conversations that determined her future without consulting her preferences. Mrs. Santos, Marcus said gently, settling into the chair she offered while Lily positioned herself on the floor near Sophia, who was clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Dr. Martinez tells me you're exploring options for Sophia's long-term care. Maria Santos nodded, her eyes filling with tears she was clearly struggling to control. I love this child more than my own life, she said, her accent thick with emotion, but I am 73 years old, and my heart is not strong. Sophia deserves a future with people who can give her opportunities I cannot provide. The conversation that followed revealed the depth of Maria's love for her granddaughter and her sophisticated understanding of what would be best for Sophia's development. Like Elena, she had researched options carefully and developed preferences based on her assessment of Sophia's needs rather than her own desires. I've heard about your foundation, Maria continued, glancing at Marcus with hopeful recognition. People say you help children find good families. Families that understand love is more important than sharing blood. Is this true? Marcus confirmed the Foundation's mission while watching Sophia and Lily interact with the cautious curiosity that characterized meetings between children who recognized similar experiences in each other's circumstances. They weren't playing together, exactly, but they were clearly assessing each other's situations with the analytical intelligence that developed in children who had learned to read adult emotions for survival purposes. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Lily made several visits to the Santos apartment, ostensibly to help Maria navigate Foundation services, but increasingly because they had developed genuine affection for both grandmother and granddaughter. Sophia was remarkably intelligent, with artistic talents that reminded Marcus of Lily's memory pictures and a quiet wisdom that suggested she understood far more about her situation than adults might assume. "She draws like I do," Lily observed after one of their visits. "Pictures that show how she feels about things that happened before. I think she might be worried about the same things I was worried about when I first came to live with you." The insight led to a conversation between Marcus and Dr. Martinez about the possibility of their family providing temporary foster care for Sophia, while the Foundation worked to identify permanent placement options. The arrangement would give Maria time to address her health issues while ensuring that Sophia remained in a stable, loving environment during the transition. It would be beneficial for both children, Dr. Martinez pointed out. Sophia would have the security of placement with a family who understands her circumstances, and Lily would have the experience of helping another child navigate the challenges she faced herself. The temporary foster arrangement became permanent 6 months later, when Maria's health declined to the point where she could no longer provide daily care, despite her love for Sophia. Rather than placing Sophia with strangers through the traditional foster system, she made the same choice Elena had made, trusting the Foundation family that had demonstrated their commitment to keeping children's best interests above all other considerations. "Are we going to adopt Sophia like you adopted me?" Lily asked on the evening when they discussed making the arrangement official. "Only if Sophia wants us to," Marcus replied. "And only if Mrs. Santos agrees that it's the best option for Sophia's future. Adoption means forever, and everyone involved needs to be certain that's what they want." The decision was made unanimous when Sophia herself requested the adoption during a family meeting that included Maria, Marcus, Lily, and Dr. Martinez. "I want to stay with Marco, Daddy, and Lily. Sister forever," she said, with the same decisive clarity that had characterized Lily's early statements about their family bond. "They make me feel safe like Abuela does, but they can also help me with homework and take me to museums and teach me about computers." The second adoption ceremony took place 2 years after the first, with Judge Williams again presiding over proceedings that officially recognized what had already become reality in their daily lives. Sophia Elena Chench had chosen to take Elena as her middle name in honor of the woman whose legacy had brought their family together, stood beside her new father and sister as they became a family of 3. By the time Lily turned 10 and Sophia turned 9, the Chen family had become the Foundation's most powerful example of how children could thrive when placed with families who understood that love was a choice rather than an obligation. Their home had evolved into a warm, chaotic sanctuary filled with art projects, homework assignments, science experiments, and the comfortable noise of 2 intelligent children who felt secure enough to express their opinions about everything from dinner choices to Foundation policy decisions. Marcus's transformation from ruthless businessman to nurturing father had been so complete that his former colleagues barely recognized the man who now prioritized bedtime stories over board meetings and who measured success in terms of his daughter's happiness rather than quarterly profit margins. Chen Industries had not only survived his philosophical evolution but had thrived under his more collaborative leadership style, becoming known throughout the technology sector as a company that balanced innovation with social responsibility. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation had become a model for international child welfare organizations, demonstrating how strategic philanthropic investment could address systemic problems rather than simply treating symptoms. Their family reunification programs had a 94% success rate, while their medical diagnostic initiatives had prevented thousands of childhood deaths, through early detection and treatment protocols. But perhaps most significantly, Marcus had discovered that his childhood pain could become his greatest strength when channeled toward preventing other children from experiencing the same trauma. The abandoned foster child, who had built emotional walls to protect himself from rejection, had become a father who specialized in helping wounded children learn to trust again. "Marco, Daddy," Sophia said one evening as they reviewed foundation reports together. "Do you think Mama Elena would be proud of how we help other children find families?" The question, asked with the innocent directness that characterized both his daughters, reminded Marcus of how completely Elena's legacy had shaped their family's mission. Through Lily, Elena had given him not just a daughter to love, but a purpose that transformed his understanding of what success could mean. "I think she would be very proud," Marcus replied, gathering both girls into the kind of spontaneous family hug that had become routine in their home. She understood that the best way to heal from painful experiences is to use what you've learned to help other people who are facing similar challenges. As they prepared for bed that evening, process that now involved coordinating bath schedules, homework completion checks, and bedtime story negotiations between two strong-willed girls, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. What had begun as Elena's desperate plan to secure her daughter's future had evolved into a family that was actively working to ensure that other children wouldn't face the same desperate circumstances. The sterile penthouse had become a home filled with laughter, love, and the daily miracles of watching two remarkable children grow into young women who understood that family was about choosing to care for each other rather than accepting biological connections as sufficient foundation for love. Chen Industries had evolved from a successful but soulless corporation into a company that used technological innovation to solve humanitarian problems, proving that businesses could be both profitable and purposeful when guided by leaders who understood that success meant more than financial accumulation. Most importantly, Marcus had learned that the family he had always craved had been waiting for him to become ready to accept it. Elena's gift hadn't been simply placing Lily in his carrot, had been trusting that the capacity for love he had demonstrated as an 8-year-old child was strong enough to survive decades of emotional self-protection and bloom again, when given the chance. As he tucked his daughters into their respective beds that night, listening to their plans for the next day's foundation activities and school projects, Marcus understood that Elena had been right about everything that mattered. Sometimes the family you choose becomes not just the family you need, but the family that transforms you into the person you were always meant to be. The boy who had shared his food and comforted Elena's nightmares had grown into a man who could provide security, love, and purpose to children who needed exactly what he had needed all those years ago. Someone who would choose them completely and promise to stay regardless of how difficult things became. Through Lily and Sophia, Elena's legacy continued to ripple outward, touching the lives of thousands of children around the world who were finding families, receiving medical care, and learning that they were valuable enough to be chosen and protected and loved. The circle that had begun in a foster home's yellow kitchen had expanded to encompass continents, but its fundamental truth remained unchanged. Family was what you built with people who chose to love you, and love was what transformed individual lives into forces for healing the world's deepest wounds. Marcus Chen was no longer alone. He was a father, a foundation director, and a living example of how choosing love over self-protection could create miracles that rippled across generations. And every morning when he woke up to the sounds of his daughters preparing for another day of changing the world, he whispered a silent thank you to Elena for seeing past his fortress of success to the heart that had been waiting 34 years to come home.